Chapter 1260. Lu Qiner was originally Lu Ping's strongest spiritual pet. Even Samling was at most on par with her in the reign. However, because the heaven and earth spirit objects that Lu Qiner needed were really difficult to find, her cultivation was once again stuck at the bottleneck of the peak of the core forging realm, after passing through the middle and late stages of the core forging realm. Lu Ping put in a lot of effort to find a heaven-ranked mid-grade wind-fire dual-elemental spirit for Lu Qiner. Once, he even found a heaven-ranked low-grade wind-fire dual-elemental spirit. Originally, Lu Qiner had planned to advance to the peak of the core forging realm, but in the end, Lu Ping was reluctant to waste Lu Qiner's talent. In the end, Lu Qiner relied on the bottleneck of the peak of the core forging realm for 20 to 30 years. Before that, Samling's cultivation had advanced to the peak of the core forging realm, and his cultivation had surpassed Lu Qiner. Lu Hai had even successfully condensed his Dharma power a few years ago, and Lu Bai and Lu Linger were only a thin film away from the Dharma power stage. This time, Lu Ping finally found the Wind and Fire Jade Wall, a mid-grade heaven stage wind and fire spirit object, from Tu Gaoshan's body. Impatiently, he took Debao to open up the underground secret room and sent the spirit object to Lu Qiner. Lu Qiner had stayed in the 9th stage of the core forging realm for a long time and had accumulated enough foundation. She only lacked this last opportunity. After handing over the 2 little wooden birds to Lu Taohua, Lu Ping used 25 top-grade spirit stones to refer to the simplest spirit gathering formation in the Wuxia school's formation inheritance explanation. He used the 5-element ring as the formation plate and told Lu Qiner to refine the heaven and earth spirit objects for cultivation before returning to the secret room. Not far away, Debao's strange laughter came from another secret room, as if he had obtained some rare treasure. Lu Ping was too lazy to pay attention to him. He ordered Lu Hai to warn and protect him. Lu Ping chose a secret room and immersed himself in cultivation. Lu Bai and Lu Linger also began to retreat, ready to welcome the condensation of the Dharma power. Lu Ping stretched out his hand and snapped his fingers. Linglong's wine cauldron rose from behind Lu Ping. Then the mouth of the cauldron slightly tilted, and a pure purple-blue light condensed along the edge of the cauldron into a small pillar of spirit light. It directly fell towards the top of Lu Ping's head. Without waiting for the pillar of spirit light to fall, a small cyclone suddenly formed above Lu Ping's head. Then the purple-blue pillar of spirit light disappeared into the cyclone. Then a purple-blue light slowly hung down around Lu Ping's body. Countless small purple-blue lights seeped out from the light shield and rushed towards Lu Ping's body like moths to a flame. Linglong's wine cauldron could barely contain half of the Qingming River's water vein. Linglong was only a first tribulation spirit treasure, although it could barely contain the water vein. After a long time, the essence of the water vein would evaporate and be wasted. Therefore, Lu Ping would focus on cultivation whenever he had time. He wanted to refine the water vein in the wine cauldron and convert it into cultivation as soon as possible. However, there was one thing that puzzled Lu Ping. It was said that the water vein of the Qingming River was formed because of Peng Daoren, and the Yulon River was bought because of Jiao Daoren. Because the 2 heaven-splitting Laozu didn't get along, the 2 water veins were not compatible. Originally, Lu Ping was still worried that the North Sea wave listening formula that he was practicing could almost be confirmed to be the water vein left behind by Jiao Daoren, one of the 49 true spirit inheritances left behind by the 7th patriarch. If that was the case, would it be like the other 2 water veins, where Lu Ping's technique would be unable to refine the water vein of the Qingming River? Or would the refined inner yuan conflict with the inner yuan that Lu Ping had originally trained in? However, this situation did not seem to have existed from the beginning. Moreover, as Lu Ping continued to refine the inner yuan that the Qingming River had transformed into was vast and mighty. Even with Lu Ping's current cultivation of the mid-Dharma stage, he could clearly feel that his own cultivation was increasing significantly. A month later, the space in front of Lu Ping fluctuated. Lu Ping, who was in the middle of his training, suddenly opened his eyes. Then, he drew a line in front of him with his index finger, and a circular space tunnel suddenly formed. A voice transmission jade talisman shot out from the tunnel and was grabbed by Lu Ping. The contents of the jade talisman surprised Lu Ping. It mainly introduced to Lu Ping the general situation of the 9 mystical tower and the increasing number of cultivators from various sects that had gathered there. 8th Sister Zhu was able to escape from the 9 mystical tower, which was surrounded by the North Mara's army. Naturally, she had a secret channel that allowed her to contact the 9 mystical tower. According to the 9 mystical tower, although the current 9 mystical tower could still hold on for a period of time, they had already suffered heavy losses, including 8th Sister Zhu. 2 of the 6 pure young cultivators of the 9 mystical tower had already fallen. In addition, they were seriously injured after killing the sky demon and could no longer fight. The 9 mystical tower only had 4 pure young cultivators left. 30 to 40% of the remaining late Dharma adepts had fallen, and the remaining ones were all injured. As for the other early and middle Dharma adepts and core forging adepts, the losses were even more uncountable. Such heavy losses were difficult for a holy land to bear. Perhaps 8th Sister Zhu was exaggerating, but at least the 2 pure young cultivators who had fallen were definitely true. It could be said that the 9 mystical tower had really reached a point where they could not afford to delay any longer. After seeing this, Lu Ping revealed a slightly mocking smile. It was true that the 9 mystical tower had suffered heavy losses, but if they had reached a critical point where they could not afford to delay any longer, it was just to fool some low-level adepts who did not know the truth. How could the foundations of the 6 holy lands be so simple? In the past few days of communicating with Lin Yu Laozu, Lu Ping could tell from his words that the 6 holy lands were not as simple as they seemed on the surface. Think about the treasured cauldron of the universe in Wuxia school. That was one of the 6 divine weapons of opening the heavens. The 9 mystical tower was also a holy land. Could it be that they did not have a treasure that was comparable? Moreover, the 5 pure young warriors could bring such a treasure, like the treasured cauldron of the universe, out of Wuxia school, without any qualms. Were they not afraid that someone would take the treasured cauldron away, or that someone would fire up their old nest? Or perhaps they were not afraid at all, because there was still a presence in Wuxia school that could hold their ground. Then what would such a presence be? Would such a presence also exist in the 9 mystical tower? The 6 holy lands were all existences that could be traced back to the time of opening the heavens. How many trump cards did they hide that were not known to others? How strong were their foundations? How many secrets were buried in them? Other than themselves, no one else would know. It was only in times of real danger that these hidden things would have the opportunity to reveal the tip of the iceberg. This time, in order to attract all the cultivators in the world to fight the 9 mystical tower, Lu Ping also learned an unexpected secret. The 6 holy lands seemed to be in control of a top-secret location. The location of this top-secret location was not a secret in the eyes of the 6 holy lands, large sects, and carefree pure young cultivators. However, at the level that Lu Ping and Jinling were at, they were clearly not qualified to know about it. Now, they planned to make this secret public and use it as a reward for participating in the battle of the 9 mystical tower. It was said that after 8th Sister Zhu suggested it, Xiao Baiyu, Qi Fan Laozu, and Lin Yu Laozu fought for it with all their might. However, the pure young cultivators from the other 5 holy lands obviously did not agree. In fact, if it was not for the crisis that the 9 mystical tower was facing, 8th Sister Zhu would not have abandoned the other 5 holy lands and stood together with Xiao Baiyu and the others. For the 6 holy lands to be able to stand tall since the beginning of the world, everyone knew that there were conflicts, schemes, and grudges between them. However, it was even more ridiculous to say that there was no tacit understanding, cooperation, or alliance between them. When faced with someone challenging the position of the 6 holy lands, they would be more united than ever. When Xiao Baiyu strongly invited Lin Yu Laozu to come, Lu Ping figured out something. Xiao Baiyu was determined to stand on the opposite side of the 6 holy lands. If he wanted the 6 holy lands to give in, the only thing he could do was to use pure young cultivators like Qi Fan Laozu, Feng Lu, and Yuan Xiaotian, as well as the large sects behind them, as well as cultivators like Lin Yulaozu, who represented the identity of a rogue cultivator. In fact, he had found a good opportunity. When the Nine Mystical Tower was besieged by Mara's army, Eighth Sister Zhu had no choice but to stand on his side. As a result, the alliance of the Six Holy Lands had to be broken. A month later, Lu Ping came out of seclusion. At this time, more and more cultivators had begun to gather outside the Nine Mystical Mountain. Only at this time could Lu Ping feel the prosperity of the cultivation world of Central Plains, where there were as many sects and cultivators as there were hairs on a cow. The cultivators who had rushed over from various parts of the Central Plains, and even those who had come from overseas had gathered together. Those who belonged to sects would occupy a better location and display their signboards. As for those who did not belong to any sects, they would each have their own hideouts. At that very moment, however, a large market had spontaneously formed outside Nine Profound Mountain. The battle between Nine Profound Tower and Demon Lua was unavoidable. Thus, the eve of the battle was naturally the best time to do business. Lu Ping wandered around the market casually. At the same time, he also looked at the situation in the market. He secretly praised the Central Plains for being a paradise for cultivation. 1,000-year-old spiritual herbs and spiritual treasures could be sold in the open, and there seemed to be a lot of them. Lu Ping even saw an early core forging adept take out a mid-grade alchemy cauldron to trade for something. If this was the North Sea, an early core forging adept would not dare to do such a thing. The moment he stepped out of the market, he would probably be killed for his treasures. Not far away, the two brothers, Qin Yu and Qin Gang, hurried over when they saw Lu Ping appear. Although the two of them were early Dharma adepts, they knew their own strengths. Among early Dharma adepts, their abilities could only be considered average. In front of a mid-Dharma adept like Lu Ping, who could kill late Dharma adepts without hesitation, they did not dare to show the slightest bit of disrespect. This was what Lin Yulaozu had instructed them to do before. "Greetings, Brother Lu. I will be counting on Brother Lu to take care of us this time." Lu Ping smiled and nodded, saying, "Not a problem. However, now that the two of you are temporarily joining my Jinling side, it will not be the same as when the next person is free and unfettered. No matter what, you have to show your name here." Chapter 1261. Through Lin Yulaozu's disclosure, Lu Ping knew that because it involved the reward for entering the top secret place, the various sects and clans that had gathered, even if they were only loose cultivators, would bring out their true abilities to fight against Mara's army. Under such circumstances, obtaining a place to recuperate near the Nine Mysteries Tower as soon as possible was undoubtedly the most important thing. The battle to encircle and annihilate Mara would not be completed in one go. It would definitely be a long and difficult battle. Otherwise, Mara's army would not have been able to besiege a holy land to such a sorry state. The Purple Sun Palace, which had just entered a stalemate with the Demon Clan in the Western Wilderness, sent people over. The conflict between the Lingyun Valley and the Demon Clan in the Endless Mountains also gradually eased. In the end, the Lingyun Valley did not manage to seize Magic Cloud City. The situation gradually stabilized, so they also sent people to the Nine Mysteries Tower. Soon after, the Skyward Pavilion and the Yuan clan once again sent pure young practitioners to lead their disciples over. Even the Wuxing School Shui Jiro came with the new 5 elements straight disciple of Wuxing School. When had the Holy Lands ever lacked air disciples? The so-called 6th, 7th and 8th air disciples were only slightly inferior compared to the 5 great rulings. The brand new 5 great rulings were still the true experts of the 3rd generation of cultivators. The Crystal Palace was the last to arrive, but in the Central Plains cultivation world, which had always been overbearing, no one dared to look down on this overseas giant. One only needed to look at the Heavenly Moon sect, which was supported by the Nine Mysteries Tower and the Skyward Pavilion, to pay a huge price and painstakingly block the Crystal Palace's invasion into the Central Plains. One could see the strength of this overseas Holy Land. After the 5 Holy Lands arrived at the outer perimeter of the Nine Profound Tower, they quickly set up camp with the Nine Profound Tower as the center. After the 5 Holy Lands, the Yuan family, Heavenly Arcana sect Skyrend, Heavenly Moon sect, Supreme Arcana Sect, Soaring Cloud Pavilion Carefree Sect, Thunderstorm Island, Violet Talisman Pavilion, Guangfa Sect, Flowing Cloud Sect, Vast Ocean Pavilion, Talisman Sect and other large sects from the Middle Plains, Eastern Sea and Southern Sea began to send their cultivators to gather around the Nine Profound Tower. Even the Spirit Beast Sect, which had always been elusive, began to appear in large numbers around the Nine Profound Tower. As the cultivators of these large sects gathered around the Nine Profound Tower, rumors about the secret location of the Seventh Patriarch's Taoist altar spread like wildfire in the cultivation world. It was said that in this battle to annihilate Mara of the Nine Profound Tower, the various sects and loose cultivators would be rewarded for entering the secret location of the Seventh Patriarch's Taoist altar. In addition, there might be a few other secret locations that could be jointly opened by pure young cultivators as additional rewards for the sects and sections. However, among these secret locations, the one related to the Seventh Patriarch's Taoist altar was the most famous. It was said that this place was once the heaven-splitting Seventh Patriarch's Taoist altar. The Seventh Patriarch had once preached to the human race here. The famous legacy of the 49 true spirits that had been passed down through the ages came from here. The foundation of all the cultivation systems of later generations came from the 49 true spirits' branches, or extensions. When the Seventh Patriarch gave his speech, it was said that there were still echoes of the Seventh Patriarch's heaven-splitting speech left behind in this secret location. If a cultivator could hear even half a sentence of it, they might be able to break through a bottleneck in their cultivation, cultivate a certain magic power, or comprehend a certain secret technique, and obtain great benefits. The opening of this secret location was extremely strange. There were indeed many people who knew the exact location, but usually only pure young cultivators could control it. Usually pure young cultivators could not open it by themselves. Instead, they needed to gather at least 7 pure young cultivators. However, these pure young cultivators could not just gather 7 at will. Instead, these 7 pure young cultivators had to have one of the 7 major bloodlines. Even the attributes of their cultivation techniques had to be the same as the 7 attributes of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, and ice. Therefore, not to mention that a sacred ground might not be able to have 7 pure young cultivators. Even if they had 7 pure young cultivators, they would still fail because of these harsh requirements. In fact, every time the Seventh Patriarch's Taoist altar was opened, at least 10 pure young cultivators would need to join forces to fully meet these harsh conditions. It was precisely because the major sects and families had found out about this in advance that they had dispatched their cultivators to the vicinity of the Nine Profound Tower. It was for the sake of making preparations in advance, so that they could obtain a greater result after the war began. That way they might be able to obtain more rewards. Fortunately, Lu Ping had received a hint from Lin Yu Laozu in advance. Although Zhenling was far away in the ocean, due to the existence of Yingshan Courtyard, he must have received the news. With Tianling Laozu's shrewdness, he would definitely send cultivators from his sect to participate in this event. All Lu Ping could do was to occupy a place for Zhenling as soon as possible and show his sect's name. Only then would he be able to occupy an advantageous position in the encirclement of Mara's army and obtain greater results in the war. Very soon, the 6 pure young cultivators from the 6 sacred grounds, Sky Splitter Sword Saint Xiao Baiyu, Yuan family clans Yuan Tongtian, Heavenly Mystery Sects 7 Fans Laozu, Spirit Beast Taming Sects Feng Lu Laozu, Heavenly Moon Sects Full Moon Laozu, Middle Earth's Loose Cultivator Lin Yu Laozu, Southern Sea's Pure Young Cultivator Yuxiang Laozu, and the rest of the 13 pure young cultivators announced to the entire cultivation world that they would use this battle to encircle the 9 mystical towers Mara to decide how to enter the 7th Patriarch's Taoist altar. The rumor in the cultivation world was finally confirmed, be it the large sects of the Central Plains or the overseas region who had been slow to react, as well as the other small and medium-sized sects. All came to their senses and began to send their cultivators to the 9 mystical tower. Lu Ping, Qin Yu and Qin Gang chose a place at the foot of the 9 mystical mountain that was easy to defend and difficult to attack. It was also a good place for them to set up a formation. This place was close to the Qingming River and was one of the directions where Mara's army could break out of the encirclement. However, if Jinling stubbornly stood in their way, they would not attract the full force of Mara's attack. After all, the Qingming River was very wide, and Jinling would not be able to defend the entire Qingming River. Moreover, as an overseas sect, most of Jinling's cultivators practice water-type magic arts, or were very familiar with, and adapted to places with abundant water. Lu Ping had chosen this place because of its geographical advantage. More importantly, Lu Ping still needed to borrow the Qingming River's water vein to speed up the refinement of the water vein that he had absorbed. Moreover, because the water vein and the Qingming River were originally one, Lu Ping could easily capture the main water vein of the Qingming River with the help of the water vein in Linglong's wine cauldron. He could then use the power of the main water vein to temporarily transform the campsite into a place with abundant spiritual energy. Of course, all of this was just Lu Ping's imagination. To complete it, he still had to hope that when the cultivators of Jinling arrived, they would not forget to bring 2 formation masters with them. Lu Ping called out all of his holy pets that he could use from the Golden House. Qin Yu and Qin Gang, who were beside him, stared with their mouths agape. The green sea snake was not a big deal. But was that arrogant tiger a member of the Hanging Eyes White Forehead Tiger clan? And that black tortoise, with such a huge body, was not something that ordinary black tortoises could reach. Could it be that it had the bloodline of Tyrant Tortoise? What was the background of that little girl with a peach blossom in her hair? How could they not know? And then there was that fat mouse. Could it be a spirit-seeking mouse? Since when could a spirit-seeking mouse reach the middle core forging stage? The identities of Lu Ping's holy pet followers greatly surprised Qin Yu and Qin Gang. However, at this moment, Lu Qiner was at a critical stage of her breakthrough, so Lu Ping did not disturb her practice. Otherwise, if a Windfire Luan appeared, who knows how shocked they would be. With the help of these holy pet followers, Lu Ping and the others were able to encircle a lot faster. Under Lu Ping's command, a simple 5 elements formation was quickly set up in just 3 days. Even though this formation could not provide too much of a defense, it was enough to occupy a territory. Because of Lin Yu and Lao Zu's hints, Lu Ping was able to encircle a territory only when the cultivators of the large schools had just started to move in. The best locations had already been occupied by the 5 holy lands, such as the Heavenly Mystery Sect, the Spirit Beast School, the Yuan clan, and the Skyrend. Even if Lu Ping had chosen a superior location, they would still look down on it because it was too small. However, to some ordinary large schools, some of them were envious of the territory occupied by Lu Ping. The Huda sect was a large school in the northwest region of Central Earth. It was not located in the western wilderness, but compared to other places in Central Earth, it was a bit barren. However, the Huda sect happened to be located outside the range of influence of the Purple Sun Palace and the Wuxia school. Although the Huda sect was not affected by the 2 holy lands, it still had quite an extraordinary influence in the northwest region. Although it was not as powerful as the Heavenly Mystery Sect, the Huda sect had 2 great cultivators to oversee it, and it could be considered as a rather powerful school among the large schools in Central Earth. Compared to the other large sects, Huda sect was not the first to arrive. Thus, most of the more ideal campsites had already been occupied by the other large sections. Seeing no other choice, Huda sect had to settle for the next best thing. They wanted to find a slightly inferior campsite. It was then that they found a very good campsite. At that moment, however, the campsite was occupied by a group of cultivators, a mix of humans and Yao. Looking at the words North Sea Jinling Camp, which were formed by Lu Ping using a secret technique to condense the water vapor of the Qingming River, the great cultivator leading the Huda sect was slightly taken aback. He said, "Where did this North Sea sect come from? Could it be that there is another large school in North Sea after Fei Ling sect?" A disciple next to the great cultivator stepped forward and said, "There are no large schools in North Sea." In recent years, Lu Tianping, a third-generation disciple of a medium-sized North Sea sectionling, has made a great name for himself in the cultivation world of Central Earth. I think this camp has been occupied by that Lu Tianping, so they are making preparations for their own school." After hearing this, the great cultivator sneered and said, "A medium-sized school wants to occupy such a treasured place? There are no heroes in this era, and he has become famous. Just go and tell him to leave this place." Chapter 1262. Lu Ping picked at his ears in disbelief, thinking that he had heard wrongly, but looking at the serious expression on the face of this early Dharma adept, Lu Ping waved his hand and pointed at all the arrangements he had made. "Retreat? Leave these for you?" Lu Ping had traveled the Middle Earth for decades and had met many experts from the famous sects, including the heirs of the many sacred grounds. These people might be arrogant, but they never used their power to bully others. Lu Ping originally thought that the so-called arrogant, despotic, and domineering bullies wouldn't appear in the cultivation world after decades of self-cultivation. But he didn't expect to meet such an arrogant, despotic, and domineering bullies. Lu Ping didn't expect to encounter such a person today. Brother Lu, the Huda sect is a major sect in the northwest of the central mainland. The sect has a long history, and there are two great adepts in charge. I heard that this time, the Huda sect is taking the encirclement of Mara very seriously, and one of the two great adepts has personally led the sect's disciples here. Qin Yu, who was standing to one side, said worriedly behind Lu Ping. The Huda sect. Even the disciples from the Holy Lands had to be polite when they saw him. Regardless of friend or foe, they had to address him as Brother Lu. Since when was it the turn of an ordinary disciple from a major sect to act so arrogantly in front of him? They were trying to take advantage of the fact that Zhenling's sect was not as good as Huda sect. But how could Huda sect be so bold? Did they think that Zhenling's sect was inferior to Huda sect? Was it just a title between a large sect and a medium-sized sect? Lu Ping smiled and said, "Sure, let the person in charge of your family say it." Lu Ping really did not think highly of this third-generation disciple of the Huda sect, who was supposed to be of the same generation as him. Li Hui was a third-generation disciple of the Huda sect, and she was also an early Dharma adept. In the Huda sect, she was naturally a true disciple. Naturally, he had heard of the name of the North Sea Water Sword Fairy. To be honest, if Chang Li Hui had seen Lu Ping in the past, she would have been more or less respectful. But how could she not be jealous? Today, she finally had the backing of the ancestral master. At the thought of being able to slap the face of the so-called number one fellow of the third generation, Li Hui felt a surge of excitement from the bottom of her heart. Thus, she had run over to flaunt her prowess in front of this water sword immortal. However, she did not expect that the person in front of her would look at her, as if she was watching a monkey show. With a few casual words, she wanted to send him away. They didn't put him in their eyes at all. Li Hui was enraged and she shouted, "You're going too far." Reaching out, she curled up a spell and clawed at Lu Ping's shoulder. Li Hui's five-finger mountain spell, when practiced to the extreme, could cause each finger to have the weight of a huge mountain. Although Li Hui was far from reaching the point where her 5 fingers were 5 mountains, this clawing would at least have the strength of a mountain. With a sneak attack from behind, in his opinion, it would be enough to make Lu Tianping suffer a loss. Li Hui knew that he was no match for the person in front of him. He only hoped to be able to make the first move. That way, even if he lost, it would be a glorious loss. Her level of practice was already inferior to his, and if she could make a move in front of the North Sea Water Sword Fairy, she only needed to gain the slightest advantage, and it would be enough for her to make a name for herself in the world of practitioners. When that time came, she would have this experience in the Huda sect, and she would no longer need to be the second official disciple. Unexpectedly, just as his hand was about to claw Lu Ping's shoulder, an undercurrent suddenly surged around Lu Ping's body. It was invisible, but it suddenly gave him the feeling of a raging wave. Li Hui's body abruptly trembled, and he involuntarily took a step back. The spell that was originally aimed at Lu Ping's shoulder suddenly missed its target. However, Li Hui's 5-finger mountain spell was also extraordinary. The moment it missed its target, his arms suddenly grew longer. and the hand of spiritual energy in midair quickly chased after Lu Ping's shoulder. However, before his hand could land again, the wave that had pushed him back surged again, and that invisible wave forced Li Hui to take another step back. But Li Hui still did not want to give up. He knew that if this continued, it would not only be a slap in the face to the North Sea Sword Fairy, but also a slap in his own face. What's more, this was happening in front of the elders of the sect, and under the watchful eyes of everyone. Li Hui seemed to feel that he had no other choice at the moment, and could only try his best to resolve the continuous wave that had surged from Lu Ping's body. However, the result was that he wanted to resolve it, but the more he tried, the more his face turned red. Step by step, Lu Ping's invisible wave reached 12 peaks in a row, and Li Hui had to take 12 steps back, until his 5-finger mountain spell could no longer reach Lu Ping. In midair, after Li Hui of the Huda sect received the order to drive away Lu Ping and the others, a mid-Dharma adept behind Rongshan Laozu of the Huda sect could not stop him in time. With a wry smile, he stepped forward and said, "Uncle Master, that Lu Tianping of the North Sea is not easy to deal with." This Uncle Master of the Huda sect had always paid no attention to worldly affairs, and only focused on cultivation. This time, the people of the Huda sect who had rushed to the 9 mystical tower to participate in the battle against Mara sect were led by Rongshan Laozu. 2 second-generation disciples in the middle Dharma stage had come, and 4 adepts in the early Dharma stage had come. Among them, 3 were third-generation disciples. It could be said that more than half of the Dharma adepts of the Huda sect had been sent to participate in the battle against Mara sect. Other than that, there were also 30 to 40 disciples in the core forging stage who had been brought along to broaden their horizons. When these people all headed towards the base of the Jinling sect, the scene looked very grand. Lu Ping returned to the base and was about to further adjust the simple 5 elements formation to strengthen the defense of the base. It was at this time that Lu Ping's divine will seemed to sense something. Just as he was about to raise his head to look, he felt a huge force descending from the sky, directly supporting Lu Ping's entire body. Lu Ping felt as if he was suddenly carrying a mountain on his back. His legs turned to jelly, and he almost fell to the ground. It was a good thing that Lu Ping's physical body was strong enough, and his reaction was fast enough. Just as the huge force was about to hit him, Lu Ping's inner yuan revolved around his body, and he used his inner yuan to resist the huge force that was supporting his body. Lu Ping raised his head to look, and coincidentally saw an old monk looking down at him with a shocked expression. He saw that this old man's hands were in the air, and he was using the same method that the third-generation disciple of the Huda sect had used to sneak up on him. The only difference was that the person in front of him had a higher level of practice, and he was a true grand adept. It seemed that the Huda sect was really going to rob him. The inner yuan in Lu Ping's body directly flowed out of his body, and together with the protective aura around his body, they turned into waves that washed upwards, directly counteracting the pressure of the Rong Mountain Laozu. Then, Lu Ping stretched out his hand, and the thin water soared into the sky, then turned into a huge boiling wave, bringing with it the sound of boiling water. The Rong Mountain Laozu let out a strange roar, and for a moment, he was at a loss of what to do, and was sent flying dozens of feet away. The boiling sky sword spell was activated, and the sword light directly turned into a huge boiling wave, which pushed the mountain-like power straight up into the sky. After that, Lu Ping followed the pair of swords and hovered in the air. The huge wave of sword light suddenly collapsed towards the center, and the edge of the sword light formed a huge circle of sword light, which rose high into the sky, encircling the Rong Mountain Laozu, who hadn't had the time to adjust his posture after being knocked into the sky. The collapsed wave of sword light in the center formed a huge whirlpool of sword light, which connected with the circle of sword light that rose up from the surrounding area. Surprisingly, it was a huge supreme sword formation. The sword spell of all rivers flow into the sea. The Rong Mountain Laozu thought that he had already overestimated Lu Ping, but in fact, Lu Ping was far more powerful than he had imagined. The Rong Mountain Laozu was an experienced cultivator, and naturally, he could see the power of the sword formation that had surrounded him at first glance. Therefore, he threw a small hill-sized spirit treasure above his head, and a yellow beam of light fell down, shielding him in the middle. He wanted to defend himself with his life. Therefore, he knew that as long as he could hold on for a while, the other disciples of his sect would come and save him. Since he had kicked an iron plate this time, he had no choice but to give up his face. However, Lu Ping sneered. The last thing he was afraid of was that someone would defend himself with their life under his sword attack. Tu Gaoshan was a perfect example. Chapter 1263. The strike launched by this rogue mountain Laozu was as powerful as a mountain, which shocked Lu Ping. This strike was similar to the one launched by the third-generation disciple of the Huda martial school, but the power of this strike was much more powerful than that of the third-generation disciple of the Huda martial school. If Li Hui's previous attack wasn't as powerful as a mountain, then this sneaky attack launched by the great ancestor of the Rong Mountain sect, which was similar to a sneak attack, had already surpassed the power of 5 mountains when he stretched out his palms. However, it seemed that because of the nature of the cultivation method that the Huda martial school had been practicing, although the power of this magic was powerful enough, it was extremely inflexible. Once their attacks were blocked by their opponents, they would often start to completely defend because they couldn't react in time. The nature of the earth was good at defending. This was the case for Rong Mountain Laozu of the Huda martial school, Earth Spirit, a pure yang cultivator from the Wuxia school, and Tu Gaoshan, the deceased Juzi. However, at this critical moment, Lu Ping surely wouldn't kill anyone, because that would make him the target of everyone. Nevertheless, he didn't mind making this Huda martial school, which had come to his doorstep, lose face, so that it would serve as a warning to the other large sects who were planning to attack the base of the Jinling martial school. Lu Ping's cultivation was improving faster and faster. Back then, when he defeated the 4th elder of the Tenma people in the Qingming River, Lu Ping's victory seemed to be extremely difficult. However, now that he was fighting against a powerful cultivator, Lu Ping seemed to be more and more relaxed. Except for the sneak attack at the beginning, which almost made Lu Ping suffer a small loss, Lu Ping turned the tables around more and more effortlessly. Rong Mountain Laozu had been trapped in the dazzling sword formation by Lu Ping. Immediately, Rong Mountain Laozu found himself in a difficult situation. The power of this supreme sword magic was much more powerful than what Rong Mountain Laozu had expected. Pieces of rocks were chopped off and sent flying in all directions. Countless sword lights shredded the mountain-shaped treasure floating above the old man's head, causing it to scatter all over the place. However, Rong Mountain Laozu was after all an experienced cultivator. Although he was trapped by Lu Ping's sword formation, he didn't just passively defend like Tu Gaoshan. When Lu Ping found a few cultivators rushing over, the thin water-flowing sword immediately sped up to kill them. However, Lu Ping immediately sensed that the mountain spirit treasure above Rong Mountain Laozu's head suddenly shone with a muddy yellow light. Next, Lu Ping felt that the thin water-flowing sword suddenly became 10 times heavier than before. Before it got close, the sword lights that were surrounding Rong Mountain Laozu's head were also disrupted. Rong Mountain Laozu surely wouldn't let go of such an opportunity. Of course, he knew that once he fell into a disadvantageous situation, his disciples would definitely come to his rescue. However, compared to that, Rong Mountain Laozu preferred to break out of the encirclement by himself. This time, he couldn't defeat Lu Ping, which had already made Rong Mountain Laozu feel humiliated. If he was trapped by Lu Ping again, and couldn't get out of the encirclement, he would have to rely on the strength of his disciples to defeat Lu Ping. At this moment, Rong Mountain Laozu still wanted to save some of his dignity. The magical power released by Rong Mountain Laozu's spirit treasure had brought a lot of trouble to Lu Ping's control of his sword art. However, at this moment, Rong Mountain Laozu could only slightly improve his own condition, but it was still far from enough for him to break out of the encirclement created by Lu Ping, which had been carefully set up by Lu Ping. As expected, every time Rong Mountain Laozu rushed out of the encirclement with his spirit treasure, Lu Ping would block him back every time. Sometimes, Rong Mountain Laozu seemed to break through a layer of sword light, but what appeared in front of him was another layer of sword light, as if Lu Ping's supreme sword art was endless and endless. Lu Ping was getting more and more familiar with the control of the encirclement. In his hands, this gigantic sword formation was not only powerful, but more importantly, it had become more flexible and flexible. Even under Rong Mountain Laozu's gravitational power, he could still forcibly trap Rong Mountain Laozu in the sword formation. Rong Mountain Laozu was getting more and more impatient. He could feel the strange changes of this sword formation, and what was more terrifying was that this sword formation was strangling the defensive spirit treasure above his head. If it continued like this, once his spirit treasure was cut into pieces, what else could he do to defend himself from Lu Ping's attacks? The Hutta clan's cultivators had already arrived, but they saw a thin layer of 5 elements formation light rising into the sky. Qin Yu and Qin Gang had activated the simple 5 elements formation that they had hurriedly set up and blocked the Hutta clan's cultivators. The 2 Hutta clan's mid-Dharma adepts looked at each other and waved their hands from behind. Dozens of Hutta clan's cultivators, led by the 6 Dharma adepts, were about to attack. Qin Yu and Qin Gang, the 2 early Dharma adepts, did not retreat. They immediately joined forces to block the attack of a Hutta clan's mid-Dharma adept. But it looked like it was extremely difficult. If it were not for the 5 elements formation as a barrier, the 2 would have been defeated in the first round. The same was true of Samling. If Lu Hai was alone in the early Dharma stage, none of the 4 early Dharma adepts from the Hutta clan would be a match for him. However, at this time, there was another mid-Dharma adept from the Hutta clan. The 3 of them had no choice but to join forces to fight against the other mid-Dharma adept. However, the Hutta clan had the advantage in numbers. Although Lu Xiaohai, Lu Dagui, Lu Taohua, and the others were not weak among their peers, they were all core forging adepts. It was already commendable for them to be able to block the attacks of 2 or 3 same-level adepts from the Hutta clan. It was unrealistic for them to face the remaining 4 early Dharma adepts from the Hutta clan. The Hutta clan had only attacked once, and the 5 elements formation was already on the verge of collapse. It looked like it would not be able to take a second blow. However, at this moment, a little person flashing with purplish-blue light suddenly appeared outside the 5 elements formation. With a loud and clear shout, "Kill!" Lu Xiaoping's small face became more and more tense. The Tsang Lu sword on his back was held in his hand, and a sharp light broke through the void. When it appeared again, the 2 early Dharma adepts from the Hutta clan cried out in alarm and leaped back. Fortunately, the Hutta clan adepts were very good at defense. With the 2 of them working together, they were finally able to block the sword of this strange little person. However, they still had a lingering fear. If the little person had launched a sneak attack and only targeted one of them, the 2 of them thought that neither of them would have been able to block it. However, before the 2 adepts could breathe a sigh of relief, their previous worries were immediately confirmed. A scream came from not far away. When the 2 of them looked over, they saw that Li Hui, who had previously been humiliated by Lu Ping, was now flying back. At the same time, beads of blood spilled from his ribs. The netherwater sword flashed and disappeared outside the 5 elements formation. Just as Lu Ping had surrounded Laozu of Rong Mountain with the sword formation, he even had the energy to spare to take care of the Hutta clan adepts outside the 5 elements formation. At this time, the Hutta clan was really a little scared. Although Jinling seemed to be alone now, every one of his subordinates was really good. The strength of each of those demon cultivators was 1 or 2 times stronger than the Hutta clan adepts of the same level. If they went all out, they could even block 2 or 3 adepts of the same level. Even so, they were already so powerful. It was said that these were only the adepts that Jinling had sent to be the vanguard. If the rest of Jinling came, what would happen? As the saying goes, what you fear will happen. Just as many of the adepts of the Hutta clan began to realize that it was not wise to provoke a sect like Jinling, the 6 flowing lights in the sky were already flying towards them. "Hey, who dares to behave atrociously in Jinling?" A loud shout exploded from the sky, and then the sound waves rolled towards them, causing many of the core forging adepts of the Hutta clan to turn pale. Their bodies swayed, and they almost fell from the sky. The faces of everyone in the Hutta clan changed. As the flowing lights neared, especially the first 3 bright lights. It was obvious that they were Dharma adepts. The first ray of flowing light flew over, and a giant axe flew out from it. With just one blow, the mid-Dharma adept of the Hutta clan, who was pressuring the Samling, was sent flying back dozens of feet. When he came to a stop, his face was flushed, and it was obvious that he had been injured by the blow. The giant axe flew back and landed in the hands of a seductive woman. Who else could it be but Qing Hu? The other 2 rays of flowing light landed, and immediately joined the battle, blocking the 2 early Dharma adepts of the Hutta clan. They were Qing Hu and Qing Lang. The 3 rays of flowing light behind them immediately joined the battle as well. They were also the remaining 3 of the Green Fox 9 bandits, who had not yet reached the Dharma stage. Although there were only 6 of the Green Fox 9 bandits left, the arrival of these 6 people instantly turned the tide of the battle. The Hutta clan no longer had the momentum they had before. The previous shout was Qing Hu's newly mastered bloodline ability, Tiger's Roar. Seeing that the Hutta clan was slowly closing in, and the 2 sides were starting to face each other along the 5 elements formation, which was about to break, Qing Hu looked up at the sky above the station and laughed. If it weren't for these words, we wouldn't have found this place so quickly. In the sky above the Jinling station, the words North Sea Jinling Station, which had been formed by Lu Ping's qi, had not been affected much by the battle. It still hung above the station like a huge flag, and could be seen clearly from dozens of miles away. Although the Hutta clan had the advantage in numbers, Jinling's side suddenly had 3 more Dharma adepts, and none of them were weak. Although they had fewer people, if they really fought, Jinling's 5 elements formation would not be able to hold, and the Hutta clan would definitely be the ones to die. Both sides had come for the sake of annihilating the evil Luo army. If they were to really have internal strife and fight each other to the death for the sake of a base, then it would truly not be worth it, and they would incur the ridicule of the other sects for no reason. Everyone, the second-generation disciple of the Hutta clan, stepped forward and was about to say something when he saw several rays of flowing light flying towards them from the sky. Chapter 1264. The Hutta sect was taken aback by the streaks of light that streaked across the sky, and their faces darkened. At this point, they did not think that their reinforcements were coming. However, as they got closer, they could see the streaks of light more clearly. Only then did they realize that under the cover of the streaks of light in front of them, there were dozens of streaks of light following them. Qing Hu, who was at the side, laughed again and shouted with a voice like a broken gong. Aha, they're finally here. But they're a step behind us. The streaks of light not far away had obviously noticed the situation here as well. The first few streaks of light immediately sped up and rushed over with an unparalleled momentum. Whoosh! Dozens of people landed on the ground at the same time. This scene was much more ferocious than the Hutta sect's people. Although these dozens of people didn't outnumber the Hutta sect's people by much, after landing, they arrogantly surrounded the Hutta sect's people. The Hutta sect's people's expressions all changed. Among the dozens of streaks of light, a middle-aged man and a woman in the mid-Dharma laws stage walked out. However, these 2 people did not even look at the people from the Hutta sect. Instead, they turned to look at the huge whirlpool of sword light more than 100 feet away. TSK. I heard that this kid has made a name for himself as soon as he arrived in the Central Plains. Now his level of practice has caught up with us, and even a great Dharma cultivator was defeated by him. I didn't expect this to be true. The 2 cultivators seemed to be the leaders of the group. The female cultivator's expression had long been shocked by everything in front of her, but her words did not seem to be a big deal at all. A complicated expression flashed across the male cultivator's face. He sighed and said, "How long has it been?" His level of practice and strength has already reached such a level. This kid's strength is probably close to Brother Tianxiang's. Even if the 2 of us join forces, we may not be able to gain any advantage from him. Seeing that the female cultivator still had a look of admiration on her face, the male cultivator snappily said, "You don't have to indulge him like this. This brat's ability to cause trouble is not small. He captured the direct disciple of the 9 Profound Tower and killed 2 of the direct disciples of the 5 Elements sect. He has offended the Holy Land. The female cultivator rolled her eyes at him and said, "If he doesn't have the ability, why don't you ask him to cause trouble for me? So what if it's a holy land? Which family doesn't have 40 to 50 Dharma manifestation cultivators? Can they run to the North Sea and destroy our sect, just because a third-generation disciple died?" The male cultivator could only smile bitterly and look at the void around him. There sure are a lot of people here to watch the show. If these people really joined forces to fight, there was a real possibility that the entire Huda sect would be wiped out. At this time, Rongshan Laozu could also see that the person in front of him did not necessarily want to kill him. Instead, he wanted him to suffer a big loss in front of everyone, as a way to establish his dominance. Rongshan Laozu was a great late Dharma adept, and he was also a famous great theurgy in the world of practitioners. How could he be willing to let others step on his shoulders? Rongshan made up his mind, and a purple gold mountain hammer appeared in his hand. This was an authentic second tribulation spirit treasure. The entire Huda sect had only accumulated 2 second tribulation spirit treasures over the past 20,000 years. One was in the hands of his senior brother, and the other was specially given to him by his senior brother in order to make it stand out in the battle against the declining clans. Originally, the great ancestor of the Rong Mountain sect was planning to use this treasure as his trump card, which would allow him to show off his power in the Devil Luo War. However, he didn't expect that this treasure would be forced out before the Devil Luo War even started. Lu Ping had seen a lot of first tribulation spirit treasures, and there were also quite a few second tribulation spirit treasures. He once had one in his possession, and now that it had passed the third lightning tribulation, it had become a pure yang spirit treasure. However, even at Lu Ping's level, the appearance of spirit treasures had become a common occurrence. Compared to first tribulation spirit treasures, the number of second tribulation spirit treasures was still very small. Those second tribulation spirit treasures were usually controlled by great theurgy masters, at least at the level of great theurgy masters. Moreover, the great theurgy masters that Lu Ping had seen, who could control second tribulation spirit treasures, were usually from famous, holy lands and large sections. Therefore, the frequency of second tribulation spirit treasures was higher. But in fact, apart from these famous and large sects, Dharma adepts from other sects who could control a first tribulation spirit treasure were already very good. One only had to look at Lin Yu Laozu, a dignified pure yang master. But he only had a first tribulation spirit treasure, the Jasper Wind Flute, in his hand. One would know how rare a second tribulation spirit treasure was. Looking at Tiankong Laozu, who was only at the mid-Dharma stage, when he wielded the second tribulation spirit treasure, the mountain-splitting axe, one would know the real status of a second tribulation spirit treasure in the world of cultivators. The Zhenling sect had been passed down for tens of thousands of years. If it were not for Lu Ping, the sect would only have a second tribulation spirit treasure left by Taishin Laozu as the most precious treasure of the sect. As soon as the mountain-splitting hammer appeared in Rongshan Laozu's hand, Lu Ping was surprised at first, and then his expression became much more serious. Rongshan Laozu swung the mountain-splitting hammer in his hand, and the space in front of him immediately became fragmented. The fragmented space extended for 300 to 500 feet in the direction where the mountain-splitting hammer struck. Along the way, the sword light that Lu Ping turned around was all swallowed by the fragmented space, and the originally smooth operation of the Sea of All Rivers technique suddenly became sluggish. Rongshan Laozu would not miss such an opportunity. The light under his feet flashed, and he was about to take the opportunity to escape. Lu Ping did not expect the mountain-splitting hammer to be so powerful. After all, Rongshan Laozu was a senior cultivator, and the second tribulation spirit treasure in his hand was much more powerful than that of Tiankong Laozu, who was only at the middle Dharma plane. Instantly, a crack appeared in the Sea of All Rivers technique. However, how could Lu Ping let him go so easily? Seeing that Rongshan Laozu was about to escape, Rongshan Laozu inevitably relaxed a little. Right at this moment, Lu Ping snorted coldly, and Rongshan Laozu's ears suddenly heard a clap of thunder. Even though he was a senior cultivator, He was still shocked by Lu Ping's snort and felt dizzy, and his body couldn't help but stop moving. A fight between powerful cultivators would only last for a moment. Battles between powerful beings could only last for a split second. Once the Rong Mountain ancestor paused for a second, the sword formation of all rivers in the sea suddenly disappeared. The thin water-long sword transformed into a pair of flood dragons and hovered above the Rong Mountain ancestor's head. That mountain-sized spirit treasure instantly shattered under the Rong Mountain ancestor's terrified gaze. Although Lu Ping did not want to kill Rongshan, he had made up his mind to teach the Huda school a good lesson. Although this first tribulation spirit treasure was extraordinary, it could not stand such a long time of being worn down by the thin water-flowing sword. Rongshan Laozu staggered out of the sword formation, and Lu Ping, who was standing aside, had already stopped fighting. Many Huda school practitioners on the side stepped forward one after another, but the disciples of Jinling's school did not make things difficult for Rongshan Laozu, and returned to Jinling's station one after another. Rongshan Laozu knew that he had lost today. He glanced at the disciples of Jinling's school in the station. Although he was aware of what happened outside the sword formation, he was still shocked when he saw the power that Jinling's school had displayed. Then, without saying a word, he left with the disciples of Huda school. Although Lu Ping already knew that Jinling's school's practitioners had arrived, when he saw so many familiar faces of his school, even though Lu Ping had traveled outside for tens of years, he still felt very close to them. He hurriedly went up to greet Tian Fan, Tian Shui, Tian Shan, and the other elders of Laozu school. At the same time, he also exchanged greetings with his senior brothers, sisters and junior disciples, and introduced Qin Yu and Qin Gang, the two disciples of Luo Xian school to Jinling school. Chapter 1265. Although Lu Ping knew that Lu Tianling and Laozu would quickly send their cultivators to participate in this grand gathering of human cultivators, he didn't expect Jinling to arrive so quickly. Although Lu Ping and the large sects that received the news in advance began to occupy their encampments at the same time, Jinling's arrival was only a few days later than him. At this time, most of the medium-sized sects in the Middle Plains had not yet had the time to send their cultivators to the Nine Profound Tower, let alone the overseas sections. Even if the medium-sized sects in the North Sea received the news, they did not have a secret transmission array that led directly to the Middle Plains like Jinling. By the time they arrived at the Middle Plains, they would not even have a place to stand. Lu Ping was originally a bit confused, but after asking, he found out that Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian had been traveling along the eastern coast of the Middle Plains for the past few years. They received the news from the Heavenly Moon sect, so they quickly notified the sect, which was why Jinling's reaction was so fast. However, he didn't expect that Jinling's relationship with the Heavenly Moon sect was already so close, which was a good thing. Speaking of the relationship between Jinling and the large sects in the Middle Plains, the Heavenly Moon sect was previously connected to the Heavenly Profound sect because of Lu Ping. This was also because Lu Ping had saved the Heavenly Profound sect's direct disciple. Moreover, the deeper reason for the establishment of this relationship was because of the Heavenly Profound sect's situation at the time. Establishing a relationship with Jinling itself was because of the Heavenly Profound sect's deep calculations. The fundamental reason for maintaining a relationship with the Heavenly Moon sect was that both sides were facing the attack of the Crystal Palace. The enemy of an enemy was naturally an ally. However, although the Crystal Palace was suppressing the rise of Jinling in the North Sea, they were more focused on expanding their sphere of influence in the Middle Plains. From this point of view, the pressure on the Heavenly Moon sect was actually greater. The reason why Jinling and the Heavenly Moon sect could be connected was because the Heavenly Moon sect and the Carefree sect had a deep relationship. Jinling's Tianqin Laozu was once an elder of the boudoir of the Carefree sect. As an alchemist, Tianqin Laozu had a very high status in the boudoir. Moreover, Heavenly Moon sect had once set up an outer clan in the North Sea. Later on, the clan was wiped out by the Crystal Palace. Lu Ping sent the only surviving girl of the clan to Heavenly Moon sect, which could be considered as forming a good relationship with the sect. especially now that he had defeated many great practitioners. It could be said that he had already shocked the entire cultivation world. His position in Jinling would only rise further. However, Lu Ping's teacher was the leader of Jinling, so he naturally could not casually express his opinion. In reality, even Lu Ping himself could not decide which of the two sects to choose. However, what made Lu Ping happy was that Jiang Tianlin Laozu was already in seclusion. This meant that Jiang Tianlin Laozu had already pushed his level of practice to the peak of the mid-Dharma stage. Once he successfully passed the second lightning tribulation, then Jinling would welcome its second great practitioner of the late Dharma stage. At the same time, Jinling would truly have the right to aspire to become the leader of a large sect. Of course, when Tianlin Laozu advanced to the mid-Dharma stage, as well as his good friend Tian Xian and second senior sister Tian Ru successfully condensed their Dharma powers, Lu Ping also went up to congratulate them. Among the third generation of Jinling, there were many late core forging adepts who had hopes of breaking through to the Dharma stage. However, other than Tian Xian and Tian Ru, who had recently broken through, the somewhat impatient Xian Yong had also tried to condense his Dharma power. Unfortunately, he had failed at the last moment. Xian Yong himself had also lost his qi. Without 3 to 5 years of cultivation, he would not be able to accumulate enough energy to break through to the Dharma stage. In reality, it was not only Xian Yong. There were many other practitioners who had been at the peak of the core forging stage for longer than him, such as Xian Shang, Xian Kai, Xian Bei, Xian Lei, Xian Su and Xian Xiang, who had all tried to break through to the Dharma stage. However, these people had all failed. After Jinling's Lu Tianping, Lu Tianyuan, and Tian Tian had successfully advanced to the Dharma stage, the third generation of Jinling's disciples were greatly encouraged, but at the same time, they were slowly infected with a layer of impetuous emotions. It was as if the Dharma stage, which was originally like a natural moat, had become less frightening. There were also feelings of jealousy, such as if he can do it, why can't I? And so on. The third generation of Jinling's disciples, on the other hand, had set off a wave of craze to break through to the Dharma stage. However, the results were very disappointing. In this wave of craze, other than Li Xuanru and Ji Xianxian, who had successfully condensed their Dharma power, the others had undoubtedly failed one after another. The consequences of failure were usually very serious. This was because breaking through to the Dharma stage required the practitioner to put in all their effort. Hence, once they failed, the price they had to pay was self-evident. Not only would a large amount of training resources be wasted, but the practitioner's vitality would also be greatly damaged. Like Xian Yong, it was already very fortunate that he had only delayed his breakthrough for 3 to 4 years. Even if he had to recuperate for 10 years or more, it was not impossible that his foundation would be damaged, and he would completely lose all hope of breaking through to the Dharma stage. Currently, among the 3 generations of Jinling's practitioners, the number of people who had advanced to the Dharma stage had already reached 17. If the outer sect elder, Xiang Lu Laozu, who wielded the vast sea bell, and the third generation practitioner, Yin Tianchu, who had been expelled from the sect, the number of Dharma adepts in Jinling had reached a terrifying 19. The number of Dharma adepts at this level was already more than the number of ordinary large sections. In terms of strength, they were no longer weaker than ordinary large sects like the Huda sect. Furthermore, other than the great Dharma adepts, the proportion of second and third generation practitioners among the Dharma adepts was also becoming more and more reasonable. It could be said that although there were twists and turns in the development of Jinling, it was indeed moving in a good direction. The arrival of the practitioners in Jinling had greatly increased the speed of the construction of the station, especially the half-baked 5 elements formation that Lu Ping had previously set up. At this time, under the arrangement of the Jinling formation masters, it was gradually being perfected. However, at this time, Lu Ping's attention had already flown to Black Fox, who was directing a few formation masters to set up the large formation. He did not expect that Black Fox would also come this time. When Lu Ping first met her, He had already given her the complete array formation inheritance of the 5 elements sect that he obtained from Golden Cicada ancestor. Then, Taoist mystic Fox immediately followed the detailed explanation of the 5 elements sect's array formation inheritance and started to reconstruct and perfect the array formation in the encampment. Black Fox was now also a cultivator in the late stage of the core forging realm. Over the years, she had been learning formations and restoring the formation runes of the treasure ship's wreckage with spiritual master Xianxian. Her attainments in formations had also reached the level of a formation grandmaster. Lu Ping's formation inheritance happened to solve her urgent need. Perhaps this was the opportunity for her to become a formation grandmaster. Xian, who was talented in array formations, but that was all. Compared to Deng Ming, the other array formation grandmaster that Lu Ping had recruited into the sect, Xian, who was still a far cry from him. Deng Ming's talent in array formations was more groundbreaking, and he had his own style. Chapter 1266. Now, even the 5th generation of Zhenling sect's disciples had begun to mature. However, the disciples under Lu Ping's tutelage had turned the difficult process of becoming Lu Ping's disciple into an unwritten rule. At the very least, they still didn't have a disciple to inherit their heritage. It wasn't that there weren't people in the sect urging them to accept disciples, and it wasn't that they didn't want to accept disciples. It was just that in their eyes, Lu Ping was only a late core forging realm cultivator with his current achievements. They were far inferior to their teacher, so how could they be qualified to teach others? Lu Ping had 3 direct disciples: Wang Xuanqi, Tian Xianyue, and Du Xianluo. There were also 3 in-name disciples: Fang Xianwei, Fang Xuanxia, and Zheng Xuanwu. Wang Xuanqi's cultivation was at the 6th stage of the core forging stage, and he stood out among the 4th generation of Zhenling's disciples. Tian Xianyue didn't come with the sect, but he was an alchemist, so his cultivation progress was slower. As for Du Jialua, he had advanced to the mid-stage of the core forging stage, and was only 1 step away from advancing to the 5th stage. Among the 3 in-name disciples, only Zheng Xuanwu came. His cultivation had broken through to the mid-stage of the core forging stage, and he was the same as Du Jialua. Among the 3 in-name disciples, Wang Xuanqi already had the qualifications to advance to the late stage of the core forging stage. However, he remembered Lu Ping's instructions and didn't rush to smelt the heaven and earth spiritual objects. Instead, after advancing to the 6th stage of the core forging stage, he began to follow his own path of cultivation to strengthen his foundation. Originally, Wang Xuanqi's cultivation was considered the fastest among the 4th generation disciples. However, Wang Xuanqi's cultivation had stagnated at the core forging stage 6th layer for several years without any progress. On the other hand, there were many talented disciples among the 4th generation of Zhenling sect who had caught up to him. However, before these people could be complacent, they suddenly realized that although Wang Xuanqi's cultivation progress had slowed down, his strength was getting more and more daunting. The cultivators who were supposed to lose to Wang Xuanqi after 30 moves couldn't even last 10 moves after advancing to the 6th stage of the core forging stage. Du Xuanluo's aptitude was the strongest among Lu Ping's disciples. However, he had never displayed any outstanding talent in front of others. His cultivation speed could only be considered above average. Among the 4th generation of Zhenling sect's disciples, his cultivation speed wasn't particularly outstanding, but it wasn't particularly eye-catching. However, only Wang Xuanqi knew how difficult it was to deal with this 3rd junior brother of his. Du Xianluo cultivated an earth elemental skill, and the density of the true essence in his body was something that Wang Xuanqi had never seen before in his life. Earth elemental skill was good for defense, and Wang Xuanqi was famous for his sharp swordsmanship in Zhenling sect. However, when the 2 of them fought, even though Wang Xuanqi's cultivation was far superior to Du Xuanluo's, it would take more than 50 rounds to break his defense. It could be seen how difficult it was to deal with Du Xianluo. Du Xuanluo's cultivation method was slightly different from Wang Xuanqi's. Wang Xuanqi's cultivation method was to push his cultivation to a certain bottleneck at a relatively fast speed, and then start to consolidate his foundation. When the time was right, he would break through the bottleneck in one go, causing his cultivation to increase by leaps and bounds again. Moreover, he didn't have to worry about his foundation being unstable. Du Xianluo, on the other hand, cultivated steadily from the beginning. His cultivation progress wasn't fast, but every step he took forward made his foundation extremely solid. In the early stages, his cultivation progress was very inconspicuous, but as his cultivation increased, more and more people began to gradually fall behind because of their unstable foundation and other various reasons. At this time, Du Zheluo's steady progress was very eye-catching. However, because he was the direct disciple of the water sword immortal, Lu Tianping, this progress seemed to be reasonable in the eyes of everyone. Du Xianluo had kept a low profile among the fourth-generation disciples of Jinling. However, compared to Tseng Xuanwu, Du Xuanluo's identity as the direct disciple of Soundwave Manor was also eye-catching. On the other hand, up until now, most of the people in Jinling still thought that this cultivator, who patrolled Huangli Island every day, was only an outer court cultivator of Jinling. Tseng Xuanwu's aptitude wasn't outstanding when compared to Du Xianluo and Wang Xuanqi, but Tseng Xuanwu's strength lay in his diligence and persistence towards cultivation. This was also the reason why Lu Ping took him in, after he gave him the opportunity to enter Jinling to cultivate. This disciple was extremely similar to Lu Ping in many aspects. Just as Lu Ping was teaching a few of his disciples, a hurried whistling sound rang out. Lu Ping's expression froze, and he had no choice but to stop teaching. After giving a few instructions to his 3 disciples, he had already broken through the void and disappeared. Outside Jinling Station, Lu Ping's figure appeared outside the formation shield that had yet to be completely set up. At this time, Tian Fan, Tian Shui, Tian Shan, and the other Dharma adepts of Jinling had already arrived. Not far away, a beam of light shot over. It was Ji Tianxian, riding a flying puppet bird. Seeing the crowd from afar, he said, "There's an army of Mara going up the Qingming River. It looks like they're coming for us. Tian Yuan, Tian Tian, and the 2 Qin brothers are trying to stop the Mara army along the way. However, it looks like they won't be able to hold them off for long." Tian Shan Laozu asked in a low voice, "How's their strength?" Ji Tianxian heaved a sigh of relief and said, "We've found at least 4 Jade Mara, and close to 10 Blood Mara." Everyone's expression changed. For Jade Mara joining forces was equivalent to the strength of 2 great adepts. In addition to the 10 Blood Mara, their strength had already far surpassed the current Jinling. Moreover, what Tian Xian and the others had found might not be the entire number of Mara army. In the station, Mystical Fox Enlighten was flying over. When Tian Fan Laozu saw her, he asked, "How long will it take for the station's great formation to be set up?" Mystical Fox Enlightened was stunned for a moment. She glanced at Lu Ping and said, "It'll probably take another 2 hours. Tian Fan Laozu said, "We have to try our best to delay this group of Mara. At the very least, we have to wait until the station's great formation is set up. Otherwise, even if we manage to repel this group of Mara, I'm afraid we'll suffer heavy losses." Lu Ping also said, "Get the disciples to set up the Dao soldier formation and prepare for battle. Speed up the installation of the station's defensive formation. This disciple will first go and meet this group of Mara army." Tian Fan Tian Shui and Tian Fan Laozu wanted to go as well. However, Lu Ping said, "However, senior uncle Tian Fan can go alone. The station still needs the 2 senior granduncles to oversee it. The arrival of this group of Mara army is very suspicious. If there's some small fry taking the opportunity to cause trouble, we'll be fully prepared." Tian Shui Laozu's expression changed. "You're saying that this group of Mara army was intentionally lured here by someone to frame us?" Lu Ping muttered to himself, "There's no harm in being prepared. In any case, we must not fall into their trap of luring us away." Lu Ping was indeed worried. Jinling was, after all, an overseas sect. Furthermore, it was an unknown medium-sized sect. Putting aside the fact that they arrived early, the moment they arrived in the Central Plains, They displayed such a strong performance because of him. Furthermore, the strength they displayed was even stronger than ordinary large sections. This inevitably aroused the resentment of other sections. If someone really lured over the Mara army, with Tian Fan and Tian Shui, who were comparable to grand cultivators overseeing the station, they wouldn't have to worry about their nest being raided. Tian Xian and Tian Ru followed the two Laozu and stayed behind to guard the camp. As for Lu Ping, he brought Lu Hai and Laozu along the Qingming River to meet up with Tian Tian, Tian Yuan, and the Qin brothers. In just a short moment, the three of them could already hear the rumbling of the battle on the surface of the Qingming River. This place was less than 100 miles away from Jinling Station. Tian Fan and Tian Shui, the two Laozu, should be able to feel the spiritual energy vibrations from the Qingming River due to the battle. Qin Yu and Qin Gang had already suffered some injuries. Both of them tried their best to cooperate with Tian Tian and Tian Yuan to block the 6 blood Mara that were chasing after them. Tian Yuan used his earth element real body to block the attack of 2 blood Shura. At the side, Tian Tian immediately followed up with a divine ability. One of the blood Shura couldn't dodge in time, so it cried out and took on Tian Tian's divine ability. Instantly it was injured. As for Qin Yu and Qin Gang, their attacks were slightly slower. After the 2 blood Shura dodged their attacks, they only delayed their pursuit. However, the 4 Mara behind them caught up. Qin Yu and Qin Gang's abilities were undoubtedly much weaker than Tian Tian and Tian Yuan's. Originally, among the 3rd generation of Jinling's disciples, other than Lu Ping, Tian Tian's cultivation was the strongest. However, now that Tian Yuan's abilities had surpassed Tian Tian's by quite a bit, Lu Ping knew that this was because Tian Yuan had refined the Dharma soul left behind by Tian Kong Laozu after he passed away. After Tian Kong Laozu passed away, he left behind a second tribulation spiritual treasure, the mountain-splitting axe, which was now in Laozu's possession. However, Tian Shan Laozu had refused to refine the Dharma soul, leaving it for his own disciple, Tian Yuan, to refine. After Lu Tianyuan had advanced to the Dharma stage and refined the Dharma soul, the growth of his abilities had far surpassed that of Tian Tian, who had advanced to the Dharma stage before him. Now that Lu Tianyuan had not only mastered his natal great magic, the earth element real body, his level of practice had also soared all the way to the peak of the early Dharma stage. This time, the 4 of them had obstructed the Mara's army from traveling up the river. If not for Lu Tianyuan, their harassment would have been like sheep in a tiger's den. Lu Ping and the others rushed over. Tian Shan Laozu stretched out his hand, and the mountain-splitting axe appeared in his hand. With a wave of his hand, a door in space opened. When Tian Shan Laozu reappeared, he was already in the air above Lu Tianyuan and the others. Kill! Tian Shan Laozu roared, and the mountain-splitting axe slashed towards the head of the blood Mara that was pouncing on him again. The unparalleled power of the second tribulation spiritual treasure caused the few blood Mara below to panic. Lu Hai looked excited, holding the Taishian tomahawk in his hand, shouting loudly to join the battle. Only Lu Ping stood still at the side. Naturally, he did not care about the few blood Mara. Chapter 1267. To put it bluntly, the foundation of a sect was the preparation before it could be unleashed. Any sect would always be racking their brains for the growth of their own sect's foundation. However, the foundation had to be used, but there were only 2 types of times when it could be used. One was when the sect was in danger, and the other was when it was about to rise. However, under normal circumstances, the sects in the world of practitioners would combine these 2 situations together. The reason for this was the once-in-a-thousand-years Mara disaster. The rise of every sect would have a big or small impact on the order of the world of practitioners. This was because, regardless of whether the rise of a sect was successful or not, it would inevitably be met with a bloodbath. Even if it was successful, it would be greatly weakened and enter a new period of weakness. Without hundreds of years of cultivation, it would be impossible to recover. However, these hundreds of years of cultivation rarely overlapped with the disaster of Mara. Once the sect was faced with such a situation again, it was very likely that it would not be able to avoid it. However, the arrival of the disaster of Mara would also require the sect to unleash its own foundation as much as possible. It was undoubtedly impossible for a sect to consecutively accumulate so much in such a short period of time. At the very least, it was an extremely risky thing to do. Hence, when the disaster of Mara descended, taking the opportunity to complete the rise of the sect became a more reliable method. After thousands of years of accumulation, when the disaster of Mara was successfully unleashed, a medium-sized sect would usually be able to cultivate more than 10 Dharma adepts in a short period of time. Once the disaster of Mara was over, if the sect did not suffer too many losses, it would often usher in a golden opportunity to rise again. Furthermore, the rise of the sect under such circumstances, other than facing the disaster of Mara, would rarely be met with the suppression and destruction of the original order of the world of practitioners. This was because when the disaster of Mara descended, all the sects would not be able to take care of themselves. Naturally, they would not be able to care about whether other sects would take the opportunity to rise. To put it bluntly, this kind of foundation was the intentional accumulation of the sect, but in reality, it could indeed be easily controlled. At the very least, it could be controlled to explode on the eve of the arrival of the Mara calamity. Just like Zhenling's sect, almost 20 Dharma adepts had suddenly appeared. Not only Zhenling, but all the other sects would also have a large increase in the number of Dharma adepts at this time. It was just that because each sect had different accumulations, the amount of energy that erupted when the disaster of Mara descended was different. In fact, this kind of eruption was usually clearly differentiated, which cultivators advanced due to their own strength, and which ones took a shortcut. Naturally, the masters of the various sects had a tacit understanding about this. Even the cultivators themselves were aware of this. Even the cultivators who took shortcuts usually had to pay a higher price for the sect. This was because these people would not even have the qualifications to advance to the Dharma stage in the past. Now that they had such an opportunity, they had to pay the price of being cannon fodder. When danger descended, they would be the first wave of people to rush forward. And to the sects, although these people had reached the Dharma stage, they were not the true successors of the sect. This was because after they had advanced to the Dharma stage, they had no possibility of advancing further. The reason why the sects still supported them was so that they could protect the true elites of the sect. Therefore, after the Great Mara calamity, the number of Dharma adepts in the world of cultivation would drop to a whole new level. However, other than some special circumstances, most of the Dharma adepts who survived were the true elites of their sects. And in Zhenling, the people who played the role of cannon fodder now seemed to be the first generation of the sect, and a considerable number of second-generation cultivators. And the essence of the sect's legacy was undoubtedly the third generation of direct disciples who had successfully advanced to the Dharma stage by relying on their own strength and training. Of course, among the third generation of Zhenling adepts, there would also be people who had lost the opportunity to advance under normal circumstances and had no choice but to take shortcuts. And there would probably be more of them. And their fate would be the same as the second generation of adepts. They would also be the vanguard to protect the legacy of Zhenling. However, if Zhenling wanted to successfully rise as a complete sect in the process of the disaster of Mara, then it could only do its best to reflect the accumulated power of the sect in the explosive growth of the Dharma adepts. It also had to do its best to preserve the number of Dharma adepts in the process of resisting the disaster of Mara. Lu Ping faced the army of Mara moving upstream. Naturally, he knew that regardless of whether this was a secret plot, it was a test that Zhenling was facing. And what Zhenling could do was to try its best to preserve its own strength and defeat the invading army of Mara. Although Tianshan Laozu's level of practice had not yet stabilized, in the face of a few blood Mara, and with the mountain-splitting axe in hand, Lu Ping did not have to worry that the cautious and steady Tianshan Laozu would fail miserably. Furthermore, there were 5 Dharma adepts beside him. In a flash, Lu Ping had already arrived at the back of the battle. There was still some distance between this place and the army of Mara that was moving upstream. However, Lu Ping was suspended in midair and did not move. However, the spiritual qi around him had begun to vibrate violently. Lu Ping was like a bottomless abyss, greedily gathering and absorbing the spiritual qi within a radius of tens of feet. This scale continued to expand until it affected the army of Mara that was coming from afar. This majestic vibration of the spiritual qi even caused the army of Mara in the Qingming River to be in a state of chaos. The aura of the Azura that was hidden within the army of Mara had also increased exponentially. Only then was the chaos suppressed, allowing the army of Mara to advance once again. However, at this time, the army of Mara seemed to know that their sneak attack had failed. However, they still relied on their large numbers to forcefully attack. Countless large and small Mara rose from the waters of the Qingming River. At this time, the true power of the army of Mara was exposed in front of Lu Ping. There were more than 10 large and small blood Mara. In addition to the 6 blood Mara that had been stopped by Tianshan Laozu and the rest, there were more than 20 blood Mara. The Jade Mara did not only have 4 but 7. There was also the Azura that was hidden in the center of the army of Mara. At this time, it was releasing its aura without restraint, pressing towards Lu Ping, who was blocking the front alone. Lu Ping's mouth curled into a smile. He had originally wanted to force the army of Mara out of the Qingming River. This time, it was exactly what he wanted. He had a lot of time left. Lu Ping suddenly roared and said, "Rise!" As soon as he spoke, the spirit qi of heaven and earth that Lu Ping had gathered suddenly exploded, forming a huge spirit qi storm within a radius of 3 miles. Then, it gradually evolved into a vibration like a spirit qi tide. It was a reference to the spirit qi tide in the land of 5 elements. Lu Ping's hands formed a seal. As the seals formed, he shouted, "Condense!" The turbulent spirit qi of heaven and earth within a radius of 3 miles suddenly calmed down with Lu Ping's shout. However, at this time, anyone could feel the uneasiness hidden under this strange calm. The Azura that was hidden in the army of Mara could no longer bear it. With a shrill cry, the army of Mara quickly moved aside to make a path. 4 Jade Mara rushed forward, 3 Jade Shura in front, and 1 Jade Demon in the back. They all rushed towards Lu Ping. At the same time, the originally calm spirit qi of heaven and earth suddenly became turbulent again. It turned out that the Azura had discovered something and began to disturb the spirit qi of heaven and earth within a radius of 3 miles that was controlled by Lu Ping. Too late. Lu Ping laughed and quickly formed a seal with his hands. A strange roar came from Lu Ping's mouth. The purple and gold clouds behind Lu Ping grew, and the Dharma of the dragon appeared in the clouds. Finally, it hovered above Lu Ping's head. A giant dragon head flashed in the clouds. At this time, Lu Ping shouted again. Draw the purple and gold clouds headed towards the direction of the army of Mara. As Lu Ping shouted, it formed a whirlpool, and a steady stream of water began to gather in the whirlpool. At this time, the army of Mara suddenly realized that the spirit qi of heaven and earth within a radius of 3 miles had long been under Lu Ping's control. As Lu Ping performed his magic, the spirit qi of heaven and earth turned into countless tentacles, or ropes that wrapped around each of the Mara's bodies. Mara's devouring. Although the army of Mara was surprised by Lu Ping's method, they were not worried. To them, the spirit qi of heaven and earth was originally a nourishment for them, and they could absorb as much as they wanted. However, as they absorbed the spirit qi of heaven and earth into their bodies, they suddenly found that the spirit qi of heaven and earth could not be refined at all. Instead, it formed needles of spirit qi that rampaged through Mara's body, turning the world upside down. The water vapor within a radius of 3 miles had gathered in the auspicious clouds above Lu Ping's head, and the needles of spirit qi were expelled from Mara's body. However, they never noticed that as these needles of spirit qi were expelled from their bodies, streams of water vapor also dissipated, and then were absorbed by the whirlpool of the auspicious clouds. Neither the blood Azura nor the Jade Mara noticed anything strange, but the Azura hiding in the center of Mara's army had already noticed something was wrong. After a violent roar, the entire Mara's army fell into chaos again. A part of the Mara's army rushed towards Lu Ping, seemingly trying to interrupt the spell he was casting, while another part of the Mara's army gathered around the Azura. It seemed that the Azura could break Lu Ping's magic, but the area it could control was limited. It could not gather many Maras in a radius of several feet. Before the Mara's army that was rushing towards Lu Ping could reach Lu Ping, the little Mara, who was equivalent to the blood condensation realm, quickly turned into dried corpses due to the loss of water in their bodies. Immediately after, the skin of the big Mara's body began to crack, and they fell to the ground amidst the continuous howling. The Mara's army became more and more chaotic. Even the blood Azuras became listless due to the loss of water vapor in their bodies. Chapter 1268. In Jinling's encampment, after Lu Ping and the rest had left, a few Jinling's array masters had helped Mystical Fox's spiritual master embed the 5 elements ring into a 5 elements array plate. With that, the construction speed of the encampment's great array immediately increased by a lot. The spiritual qi ripples from the Qingming River downstream became clearer and more intense. The entire Jinling's people immediately became more alert. It was obvious that Lu Ping and the rest had already engaged in battle with Mara's army. They wanted to delay Mara's army before the encampment's great array was completed. Under the command of Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian, more than a dozen third-generation elite disciples of late-stage core forging realm, each led a team of Zhenling sect cultivators, and began to set up the 3 talents and 5 elements Dao soldier formation, just in case. However, just when everyone's attention was attracted by the intense spiritual qi ripples from the Qingming River downstream and Mara's miserable cries, a strange laughter suddenly rang out from the encampment. A black ray of light silently appeared in the sky above the encampment where Jinling's disciples were gathering. Both of his hands pressed down in the air, and 2 strange rays of light flashed past the surface of his palms. A violent wave caused the surrounding space to tremble, descending towards the heads of the Jinling cultivators. A violent and ferocious aura instantly filled the sky, causing the expressions of everyone in Jinling to change. A late-stage Dharma adept, he was actually shameless enough to directly attack the gathered core forging cultivators of Jinling. Presumptuous, Tian Shui Laozu shouted angrily. In the blink of an eye, he and Tian Fan Laozu appeared in the encampment. The wind-snow double fan fanned, one with wind while the other with snow. The 2 fans combined harmoniously, instantly dispelling the sneak attacker's attack layer by layer. The attacker's attack missed, and was about to attack again. However, Tian Shui and Tian Fan, the 2 Laozu, had already leapt into the air, taking the initiative to attack first. For a moment, the great cultivator was actually unable to attack. Although the wind-snow double fan was only a first tribulation spiritual treasure, when the 2 fans combined harmoniously, its power was not too far off from a second tribulation spiritual treasure. In addition, Tian Shui and Tian Fan had been Laozu's cultivation companions for hundreds of years. Their minds were already connected. When the 2 of them combined harmoniously, they were actually able to completely suppress the great cultivator in front of them. However, the 2 Laozu also noticed that although the cultivator in front of them was in the late transcendence realm, the aura around him was somewhat strange. It seemed like he had just advanced to the late transcendence realm not too long ago. However, he gave the 2 of them a familiar feeling, but they just couldn't recall who he was. Tian Shui Laozu could see that the person in front of her was clearly not familiar with his own cultivation. His strength was still quite a distance away from a veteran great cultivator. Seeing that they had forced this person to retreat to the outskirts of Jinling's encampment, she was about to unleash her full strength to teach this great cultivator a lesson. Unexpectedly, Tian Fan Laozu, who was beside her, suddenly signaled for her to hold on. Tian Shui Laozu was startled. What a close shave. If this was the opponent's plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain, she almost fell for it this time. Tian Fan Laozu, who was at the side, spoke in a deep voice. You are a great cultivator, and you must be a famous person in the cultivation world. Yet you sneak attacked our sect's core forging realm disciples. Aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by others in the cultivation world? The great cultivator's entire body was shrouded in black fog, causing others to be unable to see his true appearance. When he heard Tian Fan Laozu's words, he let out a weird laugh and pounced towards Tian Fan and Tian Shui once again. Come at me. Tian Fan Laozu didn't show any signs of weakness. With a sweep of the fan in his hand, Tian Shui Laozu, who was at the side, immediately understood and wanted to assist from the side. Unexpectedly, when the great cultivator soared into the sky, another figure flew out from behind him. This time, it was heading straight for Jinling's encampment. Not good, there's another person on the other side. He's a great cultivator. Tian Shui Laozu was horrified. She could no longer care about joining hands with Tian Fan Laozu. With a spin of the snow fan in her hand, she fanned towards the other person who rushed out. Dong! Bang! 2 consecutive sounds could be heard. Tian Fan Laozu was slightly better off. The strange great cultivator's true strength was limited. He was only able to force Tian Fan Laozu back. On the other side, Tian Shui Laozu wasn't as lucky. The second great cultivator, who appeared, seemed to want to attack Jinling's encampment. In reality, he was taking advantage of the time when Tian Shui Laozu was rushing over to rescue him, to suddenly attack her with a divine ability. This second great cultivator was originally a true great cultivator. When he attacked, Tian Shui Laozu was caught unprepared. Instantly she suffered a huge loss. The qi and blood in her body were in turmoil, and she was nearly heavily injured to the point of vomiting blood. Tian Fan Laozu hurriedly went to support Tian Shui Laozu. The two of them joined hands to confront the 2 great cultivators. Currently, Jinling was obviously at a disadvantage. The newly appeared great cultivator stopped after a single attack. He basically had no intention of attacking a low-leveled cultivator like Jinling. However, the strange cultivator who appeared first didn't have such a low limit. Once the opponent joined hands to defeat Tian Fan and Tian Shui, the cultivators in Jinling's encampment would definitely be met with a calamity. Tian Fan Laozu's expression was terrifyingly gloomy. He spoke in a serious tone. The Battle of Mara is imminent. With a great enemy before us, are the 2 of you sure you want to fight to the death with me? Jinling? Are you sure you want to make your enemies happy? Looking at the 2 of you, you must have a sect backing you. If we husband and wife were to risk our lives and drag on for a while, the cultivators in the vicinity will definitely rush over. At that time, you might be able to preserve your lives. However, what about the sects behind you? The strange cultivator who was shrouded in black fog sneered. So what if someone rushes over? Who would help you, Jinling, for no reason? Furthermore, you Jinling have such great prestige. A mid-sized sect is able to defeat many large sections. Who knows how many people are secretly hoping for you to suffer? The old man and the others are merely helping them vent their anger. Tian Shui Laozu and Tian Fan Laozu's heart sank. This time, Jinling was indeed a little too ostentatious. Not only did he occupy a treasure land, he even ruthlessly slapped a large sect in the face. It was hard to guarantee that no one would be secretly resentful and take advantage of this opportunity to vent their anger. Tian Fan Laozu spoke coldly. In that case, the Mara's army in the Azure Netherworld River was also lured over by you? Without waiting for the strange great cultivator to appear, the great cultivator who came later quickly spoke. Don't talk nonsense with them. They are stalling for time. Let's end this quickly. The 2 of them rushed down again. The strange cultivator was wearing a glove-like First Tribulation spiritual treasure, while the other also had a spiritual treasure to protect himself. However, both of their spiritual treasures seemed to be very inconspicuous. Furthermore, the spiritual light on the surface of the spiritual treasure was obscure. Either the quality of the spiritual treasure was too low, or they had used a special secret technique to conceal the true appearance of the spiritual treasure. In the cultivation world, the number of spiritual treasures was limited. Clearly, the two of them had some misgivings. They didn't want others to track them through the spiritual treasures they used. The joint secret technique of Tianfan and Tianshui. The two Laozu could only be used to deal with one great cultivator. Once two great cultivators attacked, the two of them could no longer work together to deal with the enemy. Left with no choice, the two Laozu could only split up and fight one at a time. If it wasn't for the fact that the two Laozu, Tianfan and Tianshui, could be considered as veteran mid-dharma adepts and had sufficient experience in fighting against their enemies, while the other party had misgivings about their identities and didn't dare to reveal too many of their techniques, the two Laozu would have long been defeated. Seeing the two Laozu retreating in midair, Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian were extremely anxious. However, they knew that even if the two of them rushed forward, it would be useless in front of the two great cultivators. Right now, they could only hurry up and form the 3 talents and 5 elements Dao Soldier formation. With the power of the Dao Soldier formation, they might be able to fight against the two great cultivators. However, they were afraid that the two Laozu would not be able to hold on until the Dao Soldier formation was formed. Although Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian were anxious, they still didn't dare to show the slightest bit of panic. They forced themselves to calm down and orderly commanded the cultivators under them to get into position, hoping to activate the Dao Soldier formation as soon as possible. Although Tianfan Laozu was being suppressed by the strange great cultivator in front of him, the great cultivator's strength was clearly not comparable to the other great cultivator. Therefore, although Tianfan Laozu was in a sorry state, he was still able to hold on. On the other side, Tianshui Laozu had already been beaten by the great cultivator to the point of vomiting blood. However, Tianshui Laozu didn't dare to retreat anymore. Behind her was Jinling's encampment, which was slowly being strengthened. If she were to retreat again, Jinling's encampment would really be opened up to the two of them. That great cultivator could clearly see through Tianshui Laozu's determination to die. He sneered and formed a seal. The jade belt on his waist suddenly lit up, just as a cloud of mist soared. Before the great cultivator's divine ability could be formed, a sharp child's voice suddenly rang out. Kill! A small person the size of a foot pierced through the air. In his hand was a small willow wooden sword. A cold light flickered from the tip of the sword, aiming straight for the great cultivator's eyes. Secret technique of splitting the heavens, external body incarnation. The great cultivator let out a strange cry. He tilted his head back and dodged Lu Xiaoping's attack. However, the divine ability that was gradually forming in his hand was interrupted by this sudden attack, saving Tianshui Laozu from the hopeless situation. Tianshui Laozu originally had a fiery temper. After suffering such a huge loss, she became even more furious. With a loud shout, she wanted to fight to the death with the great cultivator. In addition, with Lu Xiaoping's cultivation gradually approaching that of a normal mid-dharma adepts, the great cultivator couldn't do anything to the two of them for the time being. Chapter 1269. Just as the great cultivator finished speaking, a cold snort came from the void. How troublesome! When the voice rang out, Tianshui and Tianshui's hearts seemed to have fallen into an ice house. The other party actually had a great cultivator hiding in the surroundings. As for why this person hadn't appeared, Laozu and Tianshui knew very well. That was because there were dozens of different cultivators' divine senses in the surroundings of Jinling's encampment. The time since Jinling was attacked was long enough to attract cultivators from other sects to investigate. However, these people didn't help Jinling. Therefore, Jinling was almost certain that these people were from a large sect in Middle-earth. The cultivators from other sects had also sensed or suspected their identities. However, none of them dared to step forward and offend this large sect that was targeting Jinling. After all, Jinling was an overseas sect. Moreover, it was a sect that had always been criticized in North Sea's cultivation world. To most of the sects in Middle-earth, Jinling was an anomaly. Naturally, they wouldn't offend another large sect for Jinling's sake. On the contrary, they were happy to see Jinling, a middle-sized sect that didn't know what was good for them, become a joke. However, they couldn't go too far. After all, Junling was trying to encircle and annihilate Mara's army. He had a righteous cause. Not to mention that this large sect was taking advantage of the situation. They even sent out 2 great cultivators to seize the encampment of a middle-sized sect that didn't even have a great cultivator. This was already somewhat unreasonable. Under such circumstances, they couldn't do anything to the other party. Now they sent out a 3rd great cultivator. This was blatantly shameless. It was very likely to arouse the disgust of everyone. If they were to unite against a common enemy, it would be the same as shooting a rock and dropping it on their own feet. The 3rd great cultivator was well aware of the twists and turns in this matter, so he was originally extremely unwilling to get involved. Even if he managed to expel Junling, his sect would definitely become the laughingstock of the entire cultivation world. However, the current situation made it difficult for him to back down, because the longer this dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for them. This was especially so for the 3rd-generation adept from the North Sea sections. Even Zhou Donghuang himself did not have the slightest confidence that he would be able to defeat this person. Furthermore, the mid-Dharma adept with the 2nd-level spirit treasure was not easy to deal with either. If they returned in time and gave up on this base, and instead went all out to fight the 3 of them, then the 3 of them would be the ones who would suffer. After Junling had successfully expelled the Huta sect, they had tried their best to estimate Junling's strength. However, in the end, they realized that they had still underestimated this medium-sized sect from the North Sea. This time, they had not underestimated the strength of their experts, but the unity of the entire Junling. Dozens of miles away, above the Qingming River, countless mummified Mara corpses fell from the sky like dumplings, splashing water on the surface of the Qingming River. Lu Ping stood alone in the sky above the Qingming River. Within a 3-mile radius around him, none of the smaller Mara could escape the destruction of this spell. There were more than 10 blood Mara, and only 4 blood demons were hiding in a safe zone that Azura had fought hard to secure from Lu Ping's spell. In this safe zone, there were still 3 Jade Shuras and 1 Jade Demon. The other 2 Jade Shuras and 1 Jade Demon did not have time to hide in the safe zone that Azura had fought so hard to secure. The Jade Shura that had rushed towards Lu Ping had tried to use the strange spell that Lu Ping was casting, but before it could reach Lu Ping, its entire body had already begun to wither. By the time it had reached Lu Ping, its strength had already been reduced to 50 to 60%. Lu Ping had just used the thin water-flowing sword to gently twist the Jade Shura into pieces. The other Jade Shura was also heavily injured, but it was still able to survive the attack of Lu Ping's miraculous spell. At the same time, the 3 blood Mara had survived. The Jade Demon was not so lucky. It had the same plan as the other Jade Shura. It wanted to use the Soul Eater spell to damage Lu Ping's will, and then break free from Lu Ping's control of the space. But the Soul Eater spell did not do anything under the protection of the cloud sail. On the contrary, it was hit by Lu Ping's will, which was even stronger than before. Then, an invisible soul fire burned the Jade Demon, and it screamed. It could no longer resist Lu Ping's spell, and it was turned into a dried corpse. When it fell into the Qingming River, it melted into wisps of spirit and disappeared. At this moment, Lu Ping had become a true demon god in the eyes of the Demon Luos. Even the Demon Luo army, which had always been fearless of death, shuddered in the face of Lu Ping's unimaginable power. Despite the Azura's repeated urging, the Demon Luo army still refused to advance. The power of this strike not only frightened the demonic Luo army, but even Lu Ping himself felt a chill run down his spine. He never thought that the supreme divine art sea of Mulberry Fields chant could be used in such a way, and it could even create such a terrifying effect. With this attack, 700 or 800 big and small Mara were killed. 7 blood Mara and 2 Jade Mara were completely killed. 1 Jade Shura and 3 blood Mara were seriously injured. Although the Mara army still had strength, they were all scared by Lu Ping. Not a single Mara dared to move forward. The Azura hid in the center. Very quickly, It rose into the sky and received the two exhausted Laozu, Tianfan and Tianshui, into the formation. It also attempted to surround the three great cultivators in the formation. The cultivator who was wrapped in the black fog, and the great cultivator, who appeared at the end, were quick to react. They quickly threw themselves out of the formation's encirclement. It was already not easy for dozens of people to work together, in a Dao soldier formation, to achieve such tacit understanding. However, it was something that the Dao soldier formation was helpless against. However, the second great cultivator suffered a great loss due to his carelessness. His avatar, Lu Xiaoping, actually took a blow from the great cultivator at the last moment. The willow sword in his hand pierced towards the great cultivator's eye for the sixth time. The great cultivator did not expect this little fellow to be so persistent. He could not react in time. Not only did his body, which was about to escape, not leave, he was forced to take a few steps back. It was these few steps back, whether it was intentional or not, that forced him into the three talents five elements Dao soldier formation. After taking a blow from the great cultivator, even though Lu Xiaoping had an 8,000-year-old willow body, his abdomen was almost smashed. The little child curled his lips, and immediately cried loudly, as he fell toward Xinling's encampment on the ground. After evading the encirclement of the Dao soldier formation, the two great cultivators immediately turned around, wanting to open up a gap in the periphery to rescue the second great cultivator, who was trapped in the formation. However, the Dao soldier formation formed by 40 to 50 core forging realm cultivators was not enough to deal with the wandering great cultivators. However, it could definitely defend against the great cultivators' frontal attacks. Moreover, after Tianfan and Tianshui, the two Laozu, entered the formation, they quickly took over Li Tianru and Ji Tianshuan's positions as the main formation. Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian supported them from the side, causing the might of the three talents five elements Dao soldier formation to increase by another level. While it trapped a great cultivator within, it occupied the sky above Xinling's encampment and blocked the attacks from the other two great cultivators. Tian hurriedly went forward and said, "Senior brother Lu, the situation? How is the situation?" Lu Ping was stunned and hurriedly looked at the three talents five elements Dao soldier formation that was running in the formation. He forced a smile and said, Fortunately, we came in time." Seeing their strange expressions, Tian knew that it was not the time to ask about this. He hurriedly called Lu Tianyuan to enter the five elements Dao soldier formation, and immediately participated in the three talents five elements Dao soldier formation. This Dao soldier formation was the sect-guarding formation of Xinling. Almost all the disciples of Xinling could control it with ease. Lu Ping and Laozu of Tianshan looked at each other, suppressed the shock in their hearts, and immediately entered the Dao soldier formation. Although Mara's army was frightened by Lu Ping's supreme magic power, several tens of miles away, they did not retreat. On the contrary, when Mara pressed forward again, perhaps the gathered forces would be even stronger. Xinling had to eliminate all hidden dangers before Mara's army arrived. Lu Ping's divine will swept across the sky. Lu Ping's divine will, which was flickering with green soul fire, was exposed without any reservation. His divine will, which was almost comparable to that of a pure young cultivator, immediately swept up a whirlwind of divine will within a radius of several miles. All the cultivators hiding in mid-air were so frightened that they retreated. The divine wills that crisscrossed above Xinling's station were instantly swept away. When Xinling's divine will was united, the great cultivator trapped in the Dao soldier formation could no longer struggle, especially after Lu Ping and Laozu of Tianshan joined in. A great cultivator had become Xinling's captive. While the great cultivator was busy, Lu Ping suddenly launched a sneak attack. Beams of sword light flew out of Lu Ping's fingertips and silently sank into the blood vessels around the great cultivator's back, completely blocking the circulation of his essential essence. The great cultivator's expression changed dramatically, and the Dharma idol in his core space was about to break out. Unexpectedly, a palm suddenly appeared on the back of his heart, and a copious amount of jinyuan seeped into his body, following the blocked blood vessels, and completely sealing the space in his heart. If he tried to summon his Dharma idol by force, the space in his heart would definitely collapse without the support of his Dharma idol. The great cultivator panicked, and he did not dare to make the slightest movement. "That's right," Lu Ping said softly behind him. Then, he patted the back of the great cultivator's head and knocked him out. Then, he pointed a finger at the great cultivator's forehead. A green flame seeped into the great cultivator's head through his fingertip, and a look of pain flashed across the great cultivator's face. Lu Ping snorted coldly and pressed his palm on the great cultivator's chest again. A stream of dense purplish-blue essential essence was injected into the great cultivator's chest along with a faint roar. The great cultivator immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. "What's wrong?" Laozu of Tianshan asked curiously when he saw that Lu Ping was so cautious, and even injured the great cultivator while he was unconscious. Lu Ping smiled and said, "These great cultivators have too many tricks up their sleeves. It's impossible to guard against them, so we might as well injure his core. Even if he still has some strange tricks up his sleeve, he won't be able to do anything with his current strength." Laozu of Tianshan's mouth twitched. He was very clear about the consequences of injuring his core. This could be considered as a death feud. However, when the great cultivator took advantage of the situation, he obviously didn't leave a way out for Jinling. Since the great cultivator was captured by Lu Ping, Laozu of Tianshan couldn't say anything. However, he could feel that the current Lu Ping was less cautious than before, and more ruthless and overbearing. However, when he thought about Lu Ping's current strength and achievements, Laozu of Tianshan felt relieved. The truth of the cultivation world was always the one with the bigger fist. Lu Ping looked at Tianfan and Tianshui, the two Laozu of Tianshan, and asked, "Are the two martial granduncles all right?" Tianshui Laozu touched the bloodstain at the corner of his mouth and said, "It's fine. These are just some minor injuries caused by the turbulence of essential essence. After calming down, there won't be any major problems." Lu Ping nodded his head. Although the two Laozu of Tianshan no longer had the possibility of advancing into the great cultivator realm, their cultivation had become more and more profound. Even though they were suppressed by the two great cultivators earlier, they didn't suffer any serious injuries. A trace of worry flashed past Tianfan Laozu's face. "Let's see who this person is first." At this moment, Lu Ping seemed to have thought of something and said coldly, "Who else could it be?" He extended his hand and wiped the face of the great cultivator who had fainted on the ground. A slightly pale middle-aged cultivator's face was revealed. Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian, who were bewildered earlier, seemed to have confirmed something. Lu Tianyuan said, "It's really them." Lu Ping looked at the two of them. Although Lu Ping's reputation had risen in Middle-earth, the ones who had truly traveled around Middle-earth were Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian. In terms of the famous cultivators in Middle-earth's cultivation world, Lu Ping didn't know as much as the two of them. Tian Tian took a deep breath and said, "Supreme Xian Sect's Wind Rain Dual Whips. The one who escaped earlier should be the Wind Whip Han Wuya, and this one should be the Rain Whip Huo Wuyin." The Wind Rain Dual Whips are two of the Supreme Xian Sect's famous great cultivators. The Wind Rain Dual Whips in their hands are a treasure that is not inferior to a second tribulation spiritual treasure. Back then, the two of them joined forces and managed to escape from the seven Fan Laozu's hands. That's how they became famous in the cultivation world. In today's battle, it's obvious that the two of them were too arrogant, or perhaps they were unwilling to reveal their identities. Otherwise, if the two whips joined forces, it would be difficult for us to capture either one of them. Chapter 1271. Taishan Sect. This heavy name of the sect was like a huge rock pressing down on the hearts of many Jinling cultivators, making it difficult for them to breathe for a while. This was a large established sect that had been fighting with Tianxian sect for many years. Its strength was naturally not something that a large sect like Huda sect could compare with. After all, they could force Tianxian sect to retreat all the way. Even if they had the support of a holy land, They would not have been used as a tool by a holy land if they were not strong enough. Lu Ping did not care too much about this. Taishan sect had tried to collude with Songhai sect a long time ago and express hostility towards Lu Ping. In Lu Ping's opinion, this hostility was most likely because of the contact between Jinling and Tianxian sect. Jinling wanted to become a large sect, so it had to choose a large sect in Central Plains to build an ultra-long-distance transmission array. Whether it was Tianxian sect or Tianyue sect, it was a test for Jinling. Whether it was Tianxian sect's old rival, Taishan sect, or Crystal Palace, which had been blocked by Tianyue sect from expanding its strength into Central Plains, they would not be indifferent to the possibility of these two sects receiving strong support from a large sect. These were serious tests that Jinling had to face in order to rise. Even if Lu Ping had been in another large sect, he would have encountered similar situations. What he was more concerned about was Wang Shiqing, who was previously covered by the black fog. This person's original foundation had been destroyed by Lu Ping using a secret technique, but now he had a solid late Dharma cultivation. In just a short period of nearly 100 years, Wang Shiqing had recovered his original foundation, but he had pushed his cultivation from the early Dharma stage all the way to the late Dharma stage. This was really incredible. After all, going through 2 consecutive thunder tribulations was no joke. Tian Fan and Tian Shui, the 2 Laozu, had clearly maintained sufficient vigilance towards Wang Shiqing's appearance. After all, the appearance of a single grand cultivator in the Northern Sea could be said to be a world-shaking event. However, before they came to the Northern Sea, the Azure Sea sect did not have any news regarding the appearance of a third grand cultivator. However, Wang Shiqing had suddenly appeared in the Middle Earth with the cultivation of a grand cultivator. If he were to return to the Northern Sea's cultivation world, it would definitely cause an uproar in the entire Northern Sea. When Lu Ping saw the strange expressions on the 2 Laozu's faces, he asked, "Martial granduncles, did you discover anything unexpected in your fight with Wang Shiqing?" After some thought, Ancestor Tian Fan said, "That's far too unbelievable. But now that I think about it, that Wang Shiqing did indeed give the 2 of us a feeling of déjà vu when we clashed earlier. I never thought he'd be a member of the Neptunian sect." Tian Fan and Tian Shui Laozu's suspicions had obviously disappeared after the other party revealed his identity as a Azure Sea sect cultivator. The 2 Laozu had been in the Northern Sea's cultivation world for close to 1,000 years. Naturally, they were very familiar with the Azure Sea sect's heritage. However, Lu Ping still had some doubts. He could not help but ask, "Martial granduncles, don't you feel that this Wang Shiqing's appearance is too strange? The growth of his cultivation is really too unbelievable. In just 100 years, he went from the early Dharma stage to the late Dharma stage." Tian Shui Laozu's expression was filled with hatred. She said unhappily, "It must be the Taishan sect playing tricks behind the scenes. They must have used some secret technique or shortcut. I wonder what kind of price Wang Shiqing will have to pay." Lu Ping still had some doubts. He said, "How could the Taishan sect have such a miraculous secret technique?" Tian Shui Laozu paused for a moment before saying, "Even if the Taishan sect doesn't have it, the Wuxia school behind them might not have it. These holy lands have a long history and deep heritage. Who knows what kind of secret technique they have in their hands? This time, you consecutively killed the Wuxia school's 2 great disciples. You have offended them greatly. Who knows, it might be the Wuxia school who is behind this." Although Lu Ping still had some doubts in his heart, what Tian Shui Laozu said was not without reason. Lu Ping could only suppress the doubts in his heart. At this time, Mara's army in the Qingming River had regrouped and attacked again. This was not the time for Lu Ping to worry about other things. The 3 talents and 5 elements great formation had already been formed, and the garrison's defense array had also been successfully built. This 5 elements great formation looked similar on the outside, but on the inside, it was different. Lu Ping was not afraid that the Wuxia school would be able to see through it. As long as he did not reveal the 5 elements ring, even Jin Chan Laozu himself would not know that the 5 elements great formation that Jinling had set up was the Wuxia school's formation technique. Tianshan Laozu asked again, Then how should we deal with this Huowuin? No matter what, he is still a hot potato, right? Tianfan and Tian Shuelaozu also did not know what to do. Lu Ping said straightforwardly, take away his storage artifact and his whip. Even if he wakes up, he will not be able to break free from the restriction disciple placed on him. Let's not bother with him for now. Let's talk about it after we get through Mara's attack. Just as Lu Ping and the others were preparing for the upcoming battle, the void outside the encampment trembled. The great cultivator from the Taishian sect who had escaped earlier suddenly appeared, causing a wave of nervousness in Jinling sect. However, after the great cultivator appeared, he hovered in midair and didn't make a move. Upon seeing this, Tianshan Laozu and Lu Ping rose into the air and arrived in front of the person. Lu Ping stared at the person with an unfriendly expression, sizing him up. This caused Han Wuya to feel rather uncomfortable. He knew how powerful this third-generation great cultivator was. How many famous great cultivators in the Central Plains had already fallen at his hands. However, when he thought of the fact that the great cultivator from his own sect had become the other party's prisoner, he had no choice but to bite the bullet and come forward to negotiate with Jinling. The great cultivators of the late Dharma Plain, the famous wind and rain dual whips, had fallen at the hands of a medium-sized sect, and one of them had even been captured. If news of this were to spread, wouldn't the Supreme Profound sect become the laughingstock of the Central Plains cultivation world? Moreover, the actions of the Supreme Profound sect this time were indeed a bit despicable. The reputation of looting a burning house was set in stone. Moreover, they were targeting a medium-sized sect, and if things went wrong, they would be suspected of colluding with Mara's army. This was really unreasonable. However, in his view, at this time, Jinling was facing a great dilemma, and there was no reason for him to make another strong enemy. If he could pay a price to rescue his partner, who had fallen into the other party's hands, it was not impossible. At least, it could save a little face for the Supreme Profound sect in the Central Plains. Thinking of this, Han Wuya Laozu smiled and went straight to the point. What will it take for you to release my brother Hua? Lu Ping did not wait for Laozu of Tianshan to speak. He looked up to the sky and laughed, as if he had heard a joke, and said, the Supreme Profound sect secretly lured Mara to attack our sect's encampment, and then ganged up to attack our sect. Now you want us to release him? What kind of logic is this? Since when has the Supreme Profound sect become so domineering in the Central Plains? Han Wuya's expression changed, and he said, don't slander us, sir. When we attacked, we did not know that Mara's army had arrived. Lu Ping said mockingly, do you think anyone will believe you? Why don't you go and explain to the various sects of the Central Plains? Han Wuya laughed coldly and said, I'm afraid there is no need for me to explain. I'm afraid that your sect's midway trip this time will vanish like smoke in thin air. Han Wuya paused, and then said, I'm afraid you still don't know, but Mara's army has increased again. An Azura has already brought 6 Jade Mara, 10 Blood Mara, and nearly 1,000 small and large Mara to meet up with the previous Mara team. At this time, they are not far from the encampment of your sect. Laozu of Tianshan's expression changed slightly, but he heard Lu Ping next to him say indifferently, Sir, you also said that you have not colluded with Mara. Otherwise, how could you have investigated Mara's forces so carefully? Han Wuya snorted coldly and said, the old man is not willing to talk to you. In short, as long as you can release my junior martial brother Hua, you can state whatever conditions you have. Lu Ping chuckled, but did not say anything else. Laozu of Tianshan, who was at the side, said, that's fine. As long as you bring me that Wang Xiqing's head, we will release fellow Taoist Huowuin. What do you think? Han Wuya's expression changed, and he said, fellow Taoist Wang is not a cultivator of our sect, so forgive me for not being able to do this. Laozu of Tianshan also seemed to know that this matter could not be used as a bargaining chip, and so he said, since you have appeared now, I presume that you have some understanding of the predicament that our sect is currently facing, and you have made preparations. This is fine as well. Then please lead the Azura and Mara's army away. What does fellow Taoist Han think? Han Wuya's expression changed, and he could not make up his mind for a moment. If there was only one Azura, and Han Wuya joined forces, then Wang Shiqing might be able to temporarily hold it back. But at this moment, two Azuras were leading an army of nearly 3,000 Mara. If they attacked together, not to mention two great cultivators joining forces, even four great cultivators joining forces would not dare to say that they would be able to draw out one Azura from Mara's army. If they were not careful, then the entire army might be wiped out. Han Wuya's expression darkened, and he simply revealed his true intentions. He said, "Your sect should think about the consequences of offending my supreme mystery sect." Lu Ping, who was at the side, sneered. "It seems that your sincerity is limited." "You can't say that." An unfamiliar voice came from the void not far from Han Wuya, and a cultivator in his 40s wearing a tall hat flashed out of the void. He said, "Brother Han naturally has sincerity, but your sect is too insatiable. After all, the Supreme Mystery Sect is a well-known large sect in the Central Plains, and is the backbone of the resistance against Mara's army. Your sect is only a poor middle-sized sect, relying on tricks to capture Brother Hua. You demand an exorbitant price, and this weakens the power of the cultivation world to resist Mara's army. Everyone from the perspective of fighting against Mara, do you think that the cultivation world should support a so-called North Sea sect, or a large sect of the Central Plains?" Laozu of Tianshan said angrily, "I didn't think that there would be such a sophistry like you in the Central Plains." Sophistry? The cultivator with the tall hat swept a disdainful glance at Laozu of Tianshan, and said, "What I said is correct. The Central Plains is not a place where your North Sea sect can behave atrociously. In my opinion, this time with Mara's counterattack, you Zhenling will not be able to resist it. Why don't you release Brother Hua, and then give this station to my sect? Then, Mara's army will be resisted by my sect, and you Zhenling will at least be able to retreat unscathed. What do you think?" Chapter 1272. Feiyan Pavilion was another large sect that was quite famous in Central Plains. "Fellow Chuyin, you're right." Han Wuya clapped his hands and said, "It's a small matter that you Zhenling can't stop the counterattack of Mara's army. If Mara's army opens up a gap in the encirclement that the cultivators of the various sects have painstakingly built, then it will be your sect's fault. At that time, I don't think your sect will be able to bear the condemnation of the cultivation world. Right? If you let Junior Brother Hua out and hand this place over to Feiyan Pavilion to guard, the counterattack of Mara's army will definitely not be a problem. Furthermore, Zhenling won't lose a single soldier, so why not?" The two of them echoed each other, vividly displaying the phrase sophistry. Even someone as cultured as Tianshan Laozu was dumbfounded by the two of them. Meanwhile, Lu Ping was even more infuriated by the two of them. The mocking smile on Lu Ping's face made Chuyin Laozu of the Feiyan Pavilion feel embarrassed. He said, "Brat, what are you so happy about? Don't think that just because you've defeated a few great cultivators, that you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. There are also differences in strength among great cultivators. Do you think that you can already run amok in the cultivation world of Central Plains?" As they spoke, Mara's army had already reached the shore of Qingming River. Nearly 3,000 Mara's army, led by 3 Azuras, stopped about 1,000 feet away from Zhenling's encampment. "Brat, this is your last chance. Let fellow Hua go immediately, and the cultivators of Feiyan Pavilion will immediately enter this 5 elements formation to reinforce your sect. Otherwise, you can just wait for your entire army to be destroyed." The ancestor of the Chuyin sect said sinisterly. However, at this moment, it became a joint effort to resist the evil Luo army. He had forgotten that Zhenling's sect wanted to remove the 5 elemental great formation, and that their flying cloud pavilion would resist the evil Luo army alone. Of course, no matter which one it was, the encampment would not belong to Zhenling's sect in the end. "He's here." Lu Ping still had a smile on his face, but no one could understand the words that came out of his mouth. "What do you mean by coming? Brat, what do you mean by that? If you can't make the decision, call a few old fellows over." Han Wuya was more anxious than the Yin nation's Laozu. After all, his junior brother was still in the enemy's hands. If Jinling couldn't hold on, Hou Wuyin would also die. Lu Ping chuckled but did not answer. Instead, he turned his head and looked at the back of Jinling's camp. Han Wuya and Chu Yin Laozu seemed to have sensed something, and their expressions changed. They also looked in the direction that Lu Ping had turned his head. However, Tianshan Laozu was a little slower. When he turned around with some suspicion, a few firefly-like conveyance lights had already appeared on the horizon. "Kid, are you the one who called for help?" Lu Ping smiled without saying a word, but Han Wuya said fiercely, "I want to see what kind of person you called. Who dares to save you in front of the old man?" As soon as Han Wuya finished speaking, a loud laugh was heard from the horizon. "Brother Lu, it's been decades since we last met in Tianxian City. I wonder if Brother Lu still remembers us brothers?" Lu Ping hurriedly went forward and smiled. "Brother Yin, you're treating me like an outsider. Hey Brother Xiahou, you're here too. Apologies for not coming out to greet you. Please come in." The person who came was Yun Jian, a third-generation practitioner from the Tianxian sect, who had survived the 3 rushing thunder swords. Back then, when Lei Jian and Lei Jian died tragically, Lu Ping only had time to save Yun Jian. Now his cultivation had advanced to the Dharma stage. The other practitioner with a long sword on his back was also an acquaintance of Lu Ping. He was the 4th direct disciple of the Tianxian sect, the storm swordsman, Xiahou Wushang. He was also at the mid-Dharma stage now. Xiahou Wushang was not good with words, so he only nodded at Lu Ping and said, "I heard that Mara's army was attacking. Fortunately, I didn't arrive too late." Lu Ping cupped his hands in gratitude and said, "Thank you." Yun Jian said from the side, "Brother Lu, you're treating me like an outsider. If it weren't for your help back then, we wouldn't be alive." Lu Ping hurriedly declined, but Yun Jian seemed to have suddenly discovered something new. He looked at Han Wuya, who was hovering in the air, and said in surprise, "Oh, if it isn't Han Wuya, Senior Han. Why are you standing here? Could it be that you want to help Brother Lu's sect?" Even a fool could tell that Lu Ping and Laozu of Tianshan were confronting Han Wuya and Laozu of the Chuyin sect. Yun Jian's words were just to annoy Han Wuya. Even though Han Wuya was a great practitioner and Yun Jian was only a 3rd-generation direct disciple of the Tianxian sect, these 2 sects were already mortal enemies. Under the current circumstances, Han Wuya would definitely not dare to provoke the Tianxian sect when the battle with Mara was about to break out. What's more, Elder Seven Fan was one of the initiators of the attack on the Ninexian Tower. Now that he was on good terms with Xiao Baiyu and the others, Han Wuya naturally did not want to offend them. Yun Jian had also found out about this, which was why he dared to provoke a great adept of the late Dharma stage. Han Wuya was furious, but under the circumstances where he could not fight, he would not give up his status and argue with a 3rd-generation disciple. He could only vent his anger through his nose. Although the current strength of the Jinling station was not weak, Xiahou Wushang was no weaker than Laozu of Tianshan, and Yun Jian's strength was comparable to that of Lu Tianyuan and Tian Tian. The arrival of these 2 people could be regarded as strong reinforcements for Jinling, so everyone in Jinling was naturally overjoyed. The most important thing was that although their arrival was nominally due to Lu Ping's life-saving grace, who could ignore the Tianxian sect behind them? Whether it was the Tianxian sect or the Feiyin Pavilion, when it came to the strength of their respective sects, they were undoubtedly inferior to the Tianxian sect. Therefore, when he saw Yun Jian and Xiahou Wushang rushing over to support them, Han Wuya did not feel anything, but Laozu of the Chuyin sect, who was beside him, seemed to be a little uneasy. Although the Feiyin Pavilion was also a well-known large sect in the cultivation world of the central region, its strength was only comparable to the Tianxian sect. Compared to the Tianxian sect, it was undoubtedly much weaker. However, after welcoming Yun Jian and Xiahou Wushang into the station, Lu Ping did not return to the 5 elements formation. Instead, he and Laozu of Tianshan continued to hover in the air, facing the direction from which Yun Jian and Xiahou Wushang had come. Could it be that someone else was coming? Yin Laozu could not help but feel a jolt in his heart. Indeed, what he feared had come. Another 2 rays of light broke through the air. Even Han Wuya felt that something was wrong at this time, and his expression began to change. Are you the North Sea Water Sword Celestial Lu Tianping, who has recently become famous in the central region? A soft voice came from the air, and Lu Ping was a little stunned for a moment. Obviously, this voice surprised Lu Ping for a moment. On the other hand, Laozu of Tianshan thought of something. Seeing the shock on Lu Ping's face, he hurriedly said, "Are you a fellow from the Tianxian sect? Zhenling Tianshan and martial nephew Lu Tianping greet you." Lu Ping, who was at the side, saw Lu Tianyuan hurriedly flying over from the encampment and immediately understood what was going on. An expression of amusement flashed across his face, but he immediately put on a smile and said, "So it's a senior from the Heavenly Moon sect. I am Lu Tianping. Sorry for not going out to meet you." 2 women dressed in palace clothes descended and stopped in front of Lu Ping and Laozu of Tianshan. One of the female practitioners was older, and her cultivation was already in the middle Dharma stage. She had a smile on her face, but her eyes were cold. Obviously, she was a proud person. Lu Ping could even feel an unapproachable aura from her body, especially when she looked at Lu Tianyuan, who was flying over from the side. There was even some displeasure in her gaze. However, the person who spoke earlier was not her. Instead, it was the younger-looking female cultivator beside her. Although this female cultivator could not be considered a beauty, she was gentle and delicate. Her cultivation was also in the middle Dharma stage. From Lu Ping's point of view, if these 2 were the 3rd-generation cultivators of the Heavenly Moon sect, then they would definitely be among the top direct disciples. The 2 female practitioners bowed to Laozu of Tianshan and greeted Lu Ping. As expected, they were the 3rd-generation disciples of the Tianxian sect. At this time, Lu Tianyuan also hurriedly rushed over. Seeing the other female practitioner beside the gentle female practitioner, he was slightly stunned, and an uneasy expression flashed across his face. Only then did he say, "Senior Sister Chan Yu, Junior Sister Chan Xiang, I didn't think that the 2 of you would also come." Lu Ping saw that Lu Tianyuan's expression was slightly awkward when he arrived, and that Junior Sister Chan Xiang's face was also red. It was obvious that the "didn't think" that Lu Tianyuan said was only directed at the slightly older Senior Sister Chan Yu. He could not help but find it somewhat funny. As expected, that Senior Sister Chan Yu said coldly, "I only came under orders. You probably already knew that Junior Sister Chan Xiang could come, so there is no need to pretend to be so fake." This sentence made Lu Tianyuan feel very awkward. Seeing this, Lu Ping, who was at the side, hurriedly said, "The arrival of these 2 senior sisters is undoubtedly a timely help. Senior brother Tianyuan, why don't you quickly invite these 2 senior sisters into the station to rest for a while?" Lu Tianyuan patted his head as if he suddenly realized something, and hurriedly said, "Quickly invite them in, quickly invite them in." The 3 of them returned to the station together. Lu Ping smiled at Laozu of Tianshan, who was at the side, and said, "I have to congratulate Martial Uncle." However, Laozu of Tianshan did not seem very happy, and instead said, "Everything should go with the flow. Some things cannot be forced." Han Wuya, who was at the side, laughed coldly and said, "Not bad. You even managed to seduce the 4 beauties of Heavenly Moon. This disciple of your sect is very good at living off women." Anyone could see that there was something fishy going on between that Junior Sister Chan Xiang of the Heavenly Moon sect and Lu Tianyuan. However, the difference between the 2 of them was too obvious. Whether it was in terms of cultivation or status, Lu Tianyuan could not compare with that Junior Sister Chan Xiang. Previously, Laozu of Tianshan did not seem very happy about this, and it was likely that he had also thought of this. However, Lu Ping was not worried. Lu Tianyuan's natural endowments were not bad, and he was also someone who was willing to improve. Moreover, he had previously refined the Dharma soul left behind by Tiankong Laozu. Advancing to the mid-Dharma stage was already a sure thing, and there was a high possibility that he could even advance to the late Dharma stage and become a great adept in the future. As for the status of the two of them, it was not that they could not make up for it. Now that Jinling had taken the last step to enter a large sect, he was only lacking one late Dharma adept. Lu Ping did not take Han Wuya's sarcasm to heart, but Chu Yin Laozu, who was at the side, remained silent this time. This was because he saw that Lu Ping and Laozu of Tianshan were still hovering in the air outside the station. Did this not mean that reinforcements had arrived for Jinling? Chu Yin Laozu seemed to vaguely feel that this time, the Feiyin Pavilion was going to be humiliated together with the Taishan sect. As expected, not long after the two direct disciples of the Heavenly Moon sect arrived, several streaks of light once again appeared in the sky. A loud laugh once again rang out in the air. "Brother Lu, have we come too late?" Lu Ping smiled slightly and said, "You're not late, you're just in time." The beams of light disappeared, and Xie Tianyang, Sang Yu Su Jin, as well as Qing Hu Qing Lang and Qing Hu appeared at the same time. This time, Han Wuya and the two Laozu of the Chu Yun were not just shocked, but their stomachs were spinning. When Lu Ping saw Su Jin, he hurriedly said, "I didn't expect Brother Su to come too." Su Jin smiled and said, "It's boring staying in the sect station. I heard from sixth brother that Brother Lu is going to have a good show here, so I specially came over to see what is going on. I hope Brother Lu and the elders of your sect will not blame me for being rude." Laozu of Tianshan smiled at the side and said, "This time, the matter of our sect has troubled all of you. Tianshan thanks all of you for your help." Su Jin, Xie Tianyang, and Sang Yu repeatedly said that they did not dare. At this moment, a woman flashed out from behind Sang Yu and said with a charming smile, "Brother Lu, do you still remember me?" Lu Ping was slightly stunned. When he saw Sang Yu's slightly unnatural expression, he immediately remembered the female cultivator of the Spirit Beast sect, who had taken a fancy to Lu Xiaohai at the river source. He smiled and said, "Isn't this Miss Wu Yinglan? I didn't expect you to also come to help this time. I am very grateful." Previously, Lu Ping had only sent Qinghu and the other two to ask for help from Xie Tianyang and Sang Yu. He did not expect that the Heavenly Moon sect and the Tianxian sect would also send their disciples over. However, this was not a bad thing. At least this time, with the strength of Jinling and the reinforcements from Mara's counterattack, their chances of not losing the station were greatly increased. Su Jin, Xie Tianyang, and Sang Yu were all outstanding practitioners of the third generation. They were also the heirs of the Ziyang Palace and the Empyrean walkers of the Spirit Beast sect. They were all prominent figures in the world of cultivation. Although Wu Yinglan's cultivation was slightly lower, she was also at the early Dharma stage. Furthermore, she was the only daughter of the great practitioner of the Spirit Beast sect, Wu Tianxing, the Empyrean walker of the previous generation, Wu Yinglan. So her status was also extraordinary. In addition, Qinghu and the other two were also experts among the practitioners of the same level. This time, it could be said that Jinling's ability to resist Mara's counterattack had greatly increased. As everyone exchanged greetings, Xie Tianyang saw Han Wuya and Chu Yin Laozu, who looked a little uneasy. These two were prominent figures in the world of cultivation, so Xie Tianyang and the others naturally recognized them. "Are Senior Han and Senior Chu Yin also here to help Brother Lu's sect this time? With the help of these two seniors, I think our chances of defending this time will be much higher." Whether Xie Tianyang really did not know the inside story, or was doing it on purpose, his words made the two of them feel extremely awkward. Chu Yin Laozu, who was at the side, did not even think about it. He hurriedly laughed and said, "The old man is just passing by." He was passing by and revealed to Jinling the number and scale of Mara's army's counterattack. Other than that, there is nothing else. With the help of the rising stars of the cultivation world, I think there is no need for the old man to meddle. The old man still has other matters to attend to, so he has to leave. Yes, he's leaving. Chu Yin Laozu's hurried departure caught Han Wuya off guard. However, his junior brother was still in the hands of the other party. In front of these direct disciples of the Holy Land, Han Wuya did not have the courage to threaten Jinling. He could only hover in the air, not knowing whether to advance or retreat. He felt very awkward. Chu Yin Laozu's hurried departure made Xie Tianyang and the others a little puzzled. Seeing the suspicious gazes of Xie Tianyang and the others, Lu Ping smiled and said, "This is not the place to talk. Let's go to the station and rest for a while. I'm afraid there will be a fierce battle later, and I will need your help then." Sang Yu was from the spirit beast taming sect, and was also an Empyrean walker. The cultivators of the spirit beast taming sect liked to hide their identities and travel around the world, so they knew a lot about the secrets of the cultivation world. When she saw Han Wuya and Chu Yin Laozu hovering outside Jinling Station, she seemed to have guessed something. After hearing what Lu Ping said, she smiled and said, "This time we came for this fierce battle. It's rare for Brother Lu to personally ask for help, so we naturally have to do you a favor." Su Jin was also a Linglong person. He laughed and said, that's right. This is a rare opportunity. With Brother Lu's achievements in the future, I'm afraid you won't give anyone the chance to owe you a favor anymore." When Han Wuya saw the direct disciples of the Purple Sun Palace, Spirit Beast Taming Sect, Heavenly Moon Sect, and Heavenly Xian Sect coming to help one after another, he naturally knew that all his plans had failed today. At this time, he finally made up his mind to leave. However, he was still one step behind Chu Yin Laozu. Just when Lu Ping welcomed the various reinforcements into the station and looked at Han Wuya with a smile, Han Wuya turned around to leave. Unexpectedly, the space around him suddenly became sticky, and a voice sounded in his ear, asking, "Where are you going?" Han Wuya was shocked, and the qi all over his body shook in an attempt to break free from the shackles. Unexpectedly, it was better if he didn't move, but once he moved, the shackles around his body became even tighter. This made Han Wuya even more shocked. Could it be that there was an unknown master in Jinling? After all, to be able to imprison a great cultivator like him, without him knowing, was not something that an ordinary person could do. An old man holding a green jade flute suddenly appeared beside Han Wuya. Lu Ping, who was previously smiling, hurriedly went forward to greet him and said, "I didn't expect you to come as well." The old man smiled and said, "The old man's injuries have not yet healed. You promised before that if the old man wants to recover, this matter naturally falls on you, kid." Han Wuya's heart had long sunk to the bottom. The person who came was none other than one of the 13 pure young Laozu, who had called for the world of cultivation to gather at the 9 Profound Tower to besiege Mara's army. He was Lin Yu Laozu, who represented the forces of the Central Plains individual cultivators. Lu Ping smiled and said, "Don't worry, ancestor. I've already gathered most of the spirit herbs required to concoct the pure yang stasis removal pellet. I'm just waiting for ancestor's arrival, and I can start concocting the pellet." Lin Yu Laozu smiled and said, "Rest assured, old man. If before old man still had some doubts, but this time I heard from fellow Taoist Xiao about your reputation in the overseas cultivation world. I didn't expect that your alchemy skills have already reached such a level. You can actually be mentioned in the same breath as the Fire Phoenix clan's alchemy grandmaster, Yan Wujiu, who has a great reputation in the Central Plains cultivation world." Lu Ping said modestly, "Junior does not have any virtue or ability to be mentioned in the same breath as Senior Yan." Lin Yu Laozu did not dwell on this topic. Instead, he turned to look at Han Wuya, who had been imprisoned by him, and said, "This time Mara's counterattack is no small matter. The old man is injured and can't do much. Since you've come, you should also contribute. After all, with a great cultivator like you overseeing this battle, the weight is very different." Han Wuya Laozu wanted to cry but had no tears. Chapter 1273. This time, Mara's counterattack is no small matter. It is a pity that the old man is injured and unable to intervene. Since you are here, you should help out. It is better than giving the Taishan sect the reputation of not helping a dying sect. Lin Yu Laozu's words made Han Wuya want to cry, but he had no tears. This time, the Taishan sect could be considered to have suffered a double loss. His own brother was still in the hands of others, and this time, he had fallen into the hands of Lin Yu Laozu, and was forced to work for Jinling. At that time, the Taishan sect would definitely become the laughingstock of the entire cultivation world. Unfortunately, when people under the eaves, they had to bow their heads. Lin Yu Laozu's level of practice was not considered powerful among the pure young Laozu, but the secret techniques that he had inherited from the ancient times were not to be taken lightly. The foundation of this set of inheritance was completely based on the practitioner's divine will, and half of Lin Yu Laozu's strength was in this. Unfortunately, when Lin Yu Laozu received this set of inheritance, he was already a Dharma adept. His divine will was almost fixed, and it was extremely difficult to improve on the original foundation. Even so, Lin Yu Laozu had relied on this set of secret techniques to finally push his level of practice to the pure yang stage. Now, although Lin Yu Laozu could not use this set of secret techniques to deal with pure yang adepts of the same level, it would not be difficult to deal with a great adept of the late Dharma stage. At the same time that Han Wuya was imprisoned, Lin Yu Laozu used a secret technique to seal his divine will, but did not use any of his inner yuan. However, when Han Wuya was awake, he was horrified to find that he could not control his own body at all, and a strange but unparalleled power of divine will had directly invaded his core space, subduing his Dharma power in the blink of an eye. In an instant, Han Wuya Laozu's physical body, cultivation, and magic had been used by Lin Yu Laozu, and Han Wuya was now just a puppet in Lin Yu Laozu's hands. What a marvelous skill! Lu Ping saw that Han Wuya, a great adept, was like a puppet following Lin Yu Laozu's commands. While he was praising Han Wuya, he felt a chill run down his spine. Lin Yu Laozu smiled slightly and said, "This time I just caught him off guard. It is not easy to control a great adept, and this kind of opportunity is not common. With the old man's level of practice, the most he can control is a mid-Dharma adept, but what use is a mid-Dharma puppet to the old man?" However, Lu Ping didn't think much of it. The secret technique was clearly extraordinary, and the heritage Lin Yu obtained in the past wasn't simple at all. Lin Yu Laozu saw Lu Ping's drooling expression. Laozu smiled slightly and said, "What do you think? Do you want to learn it?" Lu Ping came back to his senses and smiled bitterly. "It would be a lie to say that I don't want to learn such a secret technique." Lin Yu Laozu laughed loudly and said, "You saved the old man's life, and you owe him a great favor for refining the pure young blood stasis removal elixir. What harm is there in giving this ancient technique to you?" Lu Ping's eyes lit up, but he was still a little hesitant. "Really?" Lin Yu Laozu sighed and said, "This inheritance was the cause of the Yi-Yun sect's destruction, but it is not the Yi-Yun sect's own inheritance. The old man did not violate the sect's rule of not divulging the sect's inheritance to you. Speaking of which, from the time the seventh patriarch opened the sky until 10,000 years ago, the cultivation world mostly discussed and learned from each other. Even exchanging inheritances was not uncommon. Therefore, there were often amazing figures among the loose cultivators. However, in the past 10,000 years, the sects have become more and more powerful. They have collected the world's inheritances for their own use. Now that the power structure of the cultivation world has been set, the sects have become more and more powerful, while the loose cultivator's situation has become more and more difficult. No matter what, this inheritance cannot be passed down among the loose cultivators. And the reason why I gave it to you was not because the old man felt like it, but because this inheritance is closely related to the practitioner's divine will. The stronger the divine will, the more powerful the inheritance. It's a pity that the old man's divine will had already been fixed. Otherwise, he might not be weaker than those pure young practitioners from the Holy Lands. As for your divine will, it is extremely unique. You are only at the mid-Dharma stage, but your divine will is second only to that of a pure young adept. You are the perfect candidate to inherit this ancient secret technique. Only such a person would be able to unleash the true power of this ancient technique. When Lu Ping saw that Lin Yu Laozu was determined to pass this inheritance to him, he said, "I wonder what this secret technique is called. Does Elder need me to do anything?" Lin Yu Laozu shook his head and said, "This inheritance is actually just a set of 3 great secret techniques. These 3 great secret techniques are called Shadow Flow, Sealing Image, and Stealing Aura. The three combine to form the great secret technique, Slaying Spirit. But those who are hit by it are rarely able to escape from it so quickly. It's a pity that when masters fight, they are always on guard against each other. It's not easy for this secret technique to be effective, but once it is effective, it will definitely be a fatal blow. Hearing this, Lu Ping nodded. If this kind of heaven-defying secret technique could be used at will, it would not be called heaven-defying. But even so, once it was successfully cultivated, it would definitely be a killer move. At this time, Lu Ping saw Lin Yu Laozu crooked his finger, and Han Wuya started walking towards the two of them. However, Lu Ping noticed that at this time, Han Wuya's gaze seemed to be a little more lively, and his body seemed to be trying very hard to escape from something. It was just that it did not work, and he continued walking towards the two of them. Lin Yu Laozu explained, "This secret technique only seals the divine will and essential yuan of a cultivator, but it does no harm to the cultivator himself. Therefore, it is very easy for someone to escape from the state of being cast. At this time, the caster needs to continuously increase the power of the seal." After a pause, Lin Yu Laozu continued, "Back then, this also had something to do with the caster's own level of attainment. With the old man's divine will, it was only a matter of time before he was able to trap a great cultivator. If it was a mid-dharma adept, perhaps the old man would not have needed to care about him for an entire day." When he saw Han Wuya walk over, Ancestor Lin Yu tapped the center of Han Wuya's forehead, and then he slapped his palm down towards Han Wuya's chest. "Go!" The struggle of the original consciousness that had emerged from Han Wuya's physical body was once again suppressed by Lin Yu Laozu. Although he looked like an ordinary person, his entire person felt like he had killed a portion of spiritual qi. Outside the station, under the leadership of a few blood Mara, the Mara army had already begun to launch a probing attack on Jinling. However, with the protection of the defensive formation and the 3 talents and 5 elements formation, the disciples of Jinling did not need to rely on the strength of reinforcements to repel the invading Mara army. They also annihilated nearly 100 big and small Mara in one fell swoop, and a blood Shura was also seriously injured. Currently, the 2 great practitioners, Lin Yu Laozu and the controlled Han Wuya, were in charge of Jinling's station. However, Lin Yu Laozu was injured, and unless it was absolutely necessary, he would not intervene. At this time, this pure yang was here to deter the practitioners from the various sects who wanted to take advantage of the situation. The mid-dharma adepts were Tian Fan, Tian Shui, Tian Shan, Lu Ping, Chan Yu, Chan Xiang, Xiahou Wushang, Sang Yu Su Jin, Xia Tianyang, and Qing Hu. And the early Dharma adepts were Lu Tianyuan, Tian Tian, Ji Tianxian, Li Tianru, Yun Jian, Wu Yinglan, Qing Lang, and Qing Hu. Although the strength of Jinling's side might be slightly inferior to that of Mara's army, with the protection of the station's great array, it was not impossible for them to block the attack of Mara's army. It was a pity that Huo Wuin's base had been severely injured and his cultivation sealed after he had been captured by Lu Ping. Otherwise, if he had been handed over to Lin Yu Laozu to use the ancient secret technique, perhaps Jinling would have gained another great help in the battle. This time, the siege of Mara's army by the various sects concerned the opening of the 7th Patriarch's Way altar and several secret realms. Therefore, after the various sects had obtained the approval of the 13 pure young Laozu, they had distributed the photographic stones to every disciple who had participated in the battle. The records of the number of enemies killed by each disciple would be compiled and tabulated. This would serve as a reference for the allocation of the quota for the various sects to enter the secret realms after the battle. Although Jinling was the first to bear the brunt of the counterattack of Mara's army, it had to be said that this was an excellent opportunity to increase Jinling's military achievements. Of course, the prerequisite was that they naturally had to block the attack of Mara's army. In fact, as long as Jinling can display the strength to completely block the counterattack of Mara's army, then this Mara's army will inevitably face a siege from the various sects cultivators. Lin Yu Laozu analyzed the pros and cons of this battle to the crowd and said confidently, Tianshan Laozu agreed. In other words, the various sects are now observing our sect's strength from the sidelines. Once our sect withstands Mara's counterattack, then the various sects will inevitably rush forward to snatch the military achievements. Ji Tianxian scolded. These Central Plains sects are so shameless. We took the risk to block Mara's army, but they want to pick up the fruits of our labor from the sidelines. Tianfan Laozu said helplessly, there's nothing we can do about it. They will come under the banner of rescuing our sect, and be bold and confident. In reality, they will indeed snatch a lot of our sect's military achievements, but it is also a fact that they can reduce the burden and casualties of our disciples. Ji Tianxian was still indignant. He said in a low voice, this feeling of being taken advantage of is really unpleasant. At the side, Lu Ping said with a smile, no matter what, we have started the first battle to encircle and annihilate Mara. In the future, we will have a firm foothold in the Central Plains. Moreover, encircling and annihilating Mara will not be decided in a single battle. This is a long and drawn-out battle. Today, others have come to our encampment to take advantage of us. In the future, when we run to their doorstep and kill Mara, they naturally won't be able to say anything. There will be plenty of opportunities. As expected of Ji Tianxuan's good friend, Lu Ping was able to see through his thoughts with just a few words. As soon as he said this, Ji Tianxian was already chuckling to himself, as if he had already made up his mind to do so. As they spoke, the second attack of Mara's army had already arrived. Under the lead of the 5 Jade Mara, over 1,000 Mara's army charged towards the encampment once more. The battle had escalated. Chapter 1274. Seeing Mara's army charge over again, Lu Ping was about to make a move, but unexpectedly, he was blocked by his two good friends, Sang Yu and Xie Tianyang. Xie Tianyang said, "I heard that you guys already had a battle outside the Qingming River. Leave it to us this time. It'll be good for you, the number one of the third generation, to see our cultivation achievements over the years. This number one of the third generation title is not that easy to obtain." Sang Yu also laughed. "That's right, we are very unconvinced. Coincidentally, we have the reflection stone to accumulate battle merits. So let's compete fairly. Since Brother Lu has already made a move, then don't make a move again this time. If you are interested in competing, then everyone can make a move." The two echoed each other, but the target of their provocation was naturally not the Zhenling cultivators. Speaking of the Zhenling, only Lu Ping could be taken seriously by these Holy Land sections. The two of them were naturally targeting the Sky Profound sects Wind and Cloud Swordsman Xiahou Wushang, as well as the Heavenly Moon sects Chan Yu and Chan Xiang. Lu Ping knew the thoughts of his two good friends, and was moved. However, he also knew that since things had reached this point, Lu Ping naturally couldn't refute the thoughts of his two good friends. In any case, the one who benefited was Zhenling. They were all the best of the third-generation direct disciples of their respective sects. So naturally, they were all proud and arrogant. Xiahou Wushang did not speak, but the long sword on his back trembled. The two senior and junior sisters of the Heavenly Moon sect giggled, and the aura around their bodies did not seem to be at a disadvantage in the slightest. To the side, Su Jin had long since become impatient and said hurriedly, "Let's go. Their core forging cultivators have already fought. What are we still doing here? There are only 5 Jade Mara coming up this time. Whoever snatches them gets it." As soon as he finished speaking, Su Jin had already arrived outside of the encampment's great formation. His body was instantly covered by a layer of formation barrier. Su Jin let out a sound of surprise and shouted, "What a good formation!" Finished speaking, the ice brocade sword trembled and charged into the midst of Mara's army. Immediately, the heads of 2 great Asuras flew high into the air. Chan Yu of the Heavenly Moon sect snorted delicately and said, "Making a move against 2 great Asuras? What's so great about being a direct disciple of a holy land? It's not like it will be counted as battle achievements." When she spoke up to hear, Chan Yu's voice stopped because she saw Su Jin turn around and launch a surprise attack after he killed 2 great Asuras with his sword, and he caught a blood Asura off guard, causing one of its arms to fly into the sky. Killing a blood Shura would be counted as a battle achievement. Chan Yu didn't have time to say anything else. She called out to her junior sister Chan Xiang beside her, and the two of them leaped out of the station's defensive formation as well, charging towards Mara's army. After these 2 seniors and junior sister charged out, Lu Tianyuan hesitated for a moment, then followed them out of the encampment. Seeing this, Qing Hu and the other 2 naturally did not show any weakness. Although Qing Hu was a non-affiliated practitioner, she was not completely without a foundation. Otherwise, her level of practice would not have been able to reach the mid-Dharma stage. Seeing that Xie Tianyang and the others had about 3 generations of mid-Dharma adepts, she naturally had to go out and compete with them. Xie Tianyang winked at Lu Ping then said, let's go. They've already made the first move, we can't fall behind anymore." Sang Yu was about to follow, but unexpectedly, Wu Yinglan also wanted to go out. Sang Yu's expression immediately darkened. Although Wu Yinglan was also an early Dharma adept, in Sang Yu's eyes, she was the weakest. Now that this lady was going out, he would definitely follow by her side to ensure her safety. If he lost even a hair on her head, he would be hunted down by Wu Tianxing and Laozu. Under such circumstances, how would he have the energy to fight others? Xie Tianyang was naturally gloating from the side. Without waiting for Sang Yu to react, he had already charged out of the encampment. Sang Yu had no choice but to team up with Wu Yinglan and leave the encampment. Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian continued to control the 3 talents and 5 elements formation, firmly guarding the encampment. When Mara's army surged forward, Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian reached out their hands, and 2 spiritual level bronze bells flew out of the encampment. Clang, clang. Two crisp sounds rang out, and the hundreds of large and small Mara flying at the front immediately swayed, causing the entire attacking Mara army to be thrown into chaos. Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian took the opportunity to command the formation to charge out of the encampment, killing as many of the large and small Mara that were attacking the protective walls of the encampment as possible. Then, when Mara's army reacted again, they did not linger and immediately retreated into the encampment, relying on the protective walls of the encampment to resist the tide-like attacks of Mara's army. These two bronze bells were replicas of the two sea bells that Jinling had successfully replicated over the years, according to the method provided by Lu Ping. However, the concentrated spiritual materials needed to make this kind of magic treasure were too rare. Even though Jinling had occupied the majority of the few mineral veins discovered in the North Sea over the years, it was already commendable to upgrade these two replicas to the level of spiritual level magic treasures. In addition, Lu Ping also had a replica of the sea bell that had reached the level of a spiritual level magic treasure. In all of Jinling, there were only these three. It was a pity that Xiang Lu Laozu did not come to the Central Plains with them this time. Otherwise, with the help of the Real Sea Bell, Jinling's achievements in encircling and suppressing Mara would be even more glorious. However, the Sea Bell, a spiritual treasure, had too many implications. If it was exposed in the Central Plains, it was unknown whether Jinling could keep this spiritual treasure. Just in case, Xiang Lu Laozu did not bring the Sea Bell to the Central Plains this time. Even so, the replica of the sea bell still attracted the attention of Lin Yu Laozu. This magic treasure copper bell is interesting. It seems to have some special restraints on Mara. It's a pity that its power is a little lacking, and its grade is too far off. Otherwise, it would be a treasure that can restrain Mara. Lin Yu Laozu saw through the nature of these two copper bells with a glance. He pondered for a moment and said, "These two magic treasures must not have been easy for you to obtain. However, it's best to upgrade them. But don't use them too much in front of others. Otherwise, it'll be bad if other sects covet them." Lu Ping smiled bitterly and said, "Of course I want to upgrade the quality of these two magic treasures. However, the spiritual materials needed to refine these two magic treasures are too rare, and the difficulty of refining them is far higher than magic treasures of the same grade. The sect Diamond has used all its resources to gather spiritual materials, and two master refiners have meticulously refined them. So far, I've only refined these two magic treasures. Moreover, after promoting their quality to the spiritual level, I don't have the strength to go any further." Lin Yu Laozu looked at the two magic treasures in surprise and said, "It's really that difficult? Tell me what spiritual materials are missing. Let's see if the old man can help." Although Lin Yu Laozu was an independent cultivator, he was a pure young Laozu after all. His accumulation for more than 1,000 years was naturally extraordinary. It was normal for him to have a few kinds of precious spiritual materials in his hands. Hearing this, Lu Ping was also a little moved. He immediately reported the precious spiritual materials needed to refine the vast sea bell. Earthfire pure gold, heavenly wind iron catkins, formless jade copper, immersed silver essence. There were more than 10 kinds of spiritual materials that were rare in the cultivation world. Lin Yu Laozu could not help but laugh bitterly when he heard this. He said, "Each of these spiritual materials can be said to be treasures of heaven and earth. They are all treasures that can be used to refine spirit treasures. Moreover, they need such a large amount. If these 10 kinds of treasures are taken out, they can be used to upgrade 7 or 8 spirit treasures. But if all of them are gathered on this copper bell, it can only be upgraded to a spiritual treasure?" Lu Ping said helplessly, "That is indeed the case. However, if we can gather all of these spiritual materials, there is only one treasure left to upgrade it to a spirit treasure. As long as we have this treasure, it won't be a problem for this copper bell to be upgraded in the future." Lin Yu Laozu had long been a little discouraged after listening to Lu Ping's introduction. If there were only 1 or 2 kinds of spiritual materials, Lin Yu Laozu could still gather them. If there were more than 10 kinds of spiritual materials, and they were all in such large amounts, he felt that even a sacred ground would be disheartened if they wanted to do it. When he heard Lu Ping say that there was still one treasure missing, he casually asked, "What treasure is it?" "Sound stone. Sound stone." Lin Yulaozu seemed to be deep in thought, but Lu Ping's expression changed. Junling had long grasped the method to refine the vast ocean bell. Although the precious spiritual materials inside were a headache, it was not that they did not exist in the cultivation world. It was just that it was abnormally difficult to gather them. However, this sound stone was something that Junling had never heard of before. In reality, Lu Ping vaguely seemed to have some impression of this treasure. However, this familiarity came from the impression that Lu Ping had obtained when he absorbed and refined Fei Tian Laozu's pure yang soul. Fei Tian Laozu's pure yang soul had been baptized by time for thousands of years, and the spiritual memories inside had already been lost. Although this sound stone sounded familiar, he really did not know what it was. Lu Ping carefully asked, "Senior, do you know what this sound stone is?" Lin Yulaozu nodded and said, "Sound stone. This item should exist in the 7th Patriarch's Tao altar. It was the treasure that was used to forge the Tao altar when the 7th Patriarch opened the altar to give a lecture." 7th Patriarch's Tao altar? This time, it was Lu Ping's turn to be shocked. That was the place where the 7th Patriarch opened the altar to give a lecture to the cultivators of the world. It was the holy land of this world, and the sound stone actually existed in this place. When the 7th Patriarch opened the altar to give a lecture, his words were simple and profound. Just a few words could make people have an epiphany. Even his tone could give people a shock. However, the 7th Patriarch's power was so great that it was impossible for the people listening to the 7th Patriarch's lecture to comprehend everything. Usually, after listening for a short while, they would be immersed in their own epiphany and unable to extricate themselves. Naturally, no one could listen to the 7th Patriarch's lecture in its entirety. This was also the reason why the 49 true teachings of the 7th Patriarch were passed down to the world. In order to record the 7th Patriarch's lecture in its original form, the cultivators of the world used the sound stone to forge the 7th Patriarch's Tao altar. This sound stone could preserve the original sound of the 7th Patriarch's lecture and continue to echo until now. Although the sound has become fainter and fainter, every time the 7th Patriarch's Tao altar opens, the cultivators who enter will comprehend the sound of the Tao altar, hoping to find one or two of the 7th Patriarch's true voices to increase their cultivation or to comprehend a secret technique. Chapter 1275. In this battle against Mara, the battle credit calculation was extremely strict. Ordinary practitioners would only be able to count the number of Mara kills that were at most one level lower than their level of practice. This meant that for a mid-Dharma adept like Lu Ping, if he wanted to count his battle credit, he had to kill at least a blood Mara. If it was a big Mara that was equivalent to the core forging stage, to a mid-Dharma adept, it would be as easy as chopping vegetables. There was no point in doing so. Of course, for early Dharma adepts like Lu Tianyuan and Ji Tianxian, killing a big Mara that was equivalent to a late core forging stage could also be counted as a battle credit. It was just that compared to killing a blood Mara, the difference was like heaven and earth. However, it was still much higher than a mid-Dharma adept killing a blood Mara. By the same token, if a mid-Dharma adept killed a Jade Mara that was equivalent to a Jade Mara of the same level, the battle credit he would receive would definitely be higher than if a great Dharma adept killed a Jade Mara. All in all, this method of calculating battle credit took into account practitioners of different levels of practice. At the same time, it also took into account the relative difficulty of calculating battle credit. However, Lu Ping did not care too much about Xie Tianyang and the rest's fair challenge. Lu Ping took out his imaging stone and looked at it. Previously, when he was above the Qingming River, he had used the changing seas into mulberry fields because of his sudden enlightenment. In one fell swoop, Lu Ping had killed a Jade Shura, a Jade Demon, 5 Blood Shuras and 2 Blood Demons. In addition, he had severely injured a Jade Shura and 3 Blood Mara, and killed more than 600 big and small Mara. It was a pity that these achievements did not count towards Lu Ping's battle credit. Even so, with these achievements, Lu Ping did not believe that Xie Tianyang and the rest would be able to catch up to him in this battle. After finding out the whereabouts of the Sound Stone from Lin Yu Laozu, Lu Ping was even more determined to go to the 7th Patriarch's altar. If he wanted to go there, he had to be among the best in this battle against Mara. At the very least, he had to be among the best among the mid-Dharma adepts. There had been rumors that this battle against Mara would open up the battle credit leaderboard. Lu Ping had just received confirmation from Lin Yu Laozu, and the battle credit leaderboard had already been opened when Mara had attacked Jinling's base. There was no overall leaderboard for the battle credit leaderboard. The battle credit leaderboard was based on the different levels of practice of the adepts, which would result in different points for killing Mara. Therefore, the leaderboard was only based on the different levels of practice of the adepts, and Lu Ping naturally only paid attention to the leaderboard for the mid-Dharma adepts. According to the rules of the battle credit leaderboard, a mid-Dharma adept would naturally not receive any battle credit for killing Mara or Little Mara. However, killing a Blood Shura would be worth 3 points, and a Blood Demon would be worth 5 points. Killing a Jade Shura of the same level would be worth 10 points, and a Jade Demon would be worth 15 points. If one was able to kill an Azura of a higher level, it would directly increase by 20 points. However, if it was a Sky Demon, it would be a whole 30 points. Lu Ping made a rough estimate of the battle above the Qingming River, and realized that he had still received 50 points. Although now, because of the 7th Patriarch's altar, Lu Ping now had an additional motivation to fight for battle credits. Due to the previous agreement he had with his companions, Lu Ping could not directly fight. However, the way the battle credit leaderboard was calculated for early Dharma adepts was different. This was because of the huge gap between a big Mara and a blood Mara. Although early Dharma adepts could still receive battle credits for killing a big Mara, which was equivalent to a late core forging adept, regardless of whether it was a big Shura or a great demon, the battle credit would only be 1 point. However, if early Dharma adepts were able to kill a blood Mara of the same level, the points would become 10 points for a blood Shura and 15 points for a blood demon, which was basically the same as how a mid-Dharma adept would receive points for killing a blood Shura of the same level. Similarly, when an early Dharma adept killed a Jade Mara of a higher level, they would also receive 20 points and 30 points respectively. As for the higher level Azuras and Heavenly Demons, although early Dharma adepts basically had no chance of killing these beings, the battle credit leaderboard still listed the reward points for them. That was, if an early Dharma adept killed a blood Shura 2 levels above him, an Azura would receive 40 points, and a Sky Demon would receive 60 points. The same principle also applied to late Dharma adepts. If Jade Mara died at their hands, they would only receive 30 to 50 points. However, if someone completed a cross-level battle, they would receive 10 or 15 points for the points they earned. In reality, this was also a deliberate move by the 13 Pure Yang adepts when they came up with the battle credit leaderboard. The reason was simple, and that was every time Mara increased his level of practice, the increase in his abilities would often far exceed that of a human adept of the same level of practice. Therefore, the 13 Pure Yang adepts did not approve of anyone taking the risk to challenge a strong practitioner like Mara. In reality, this was also a deliberate move by the 13 Pure Yang adepts when they came up with the battle credit leaderboard. The reason was simple, and that was, every time Mara increased his level of practice, the degree of his ability would often far exceed that of a human adept who had the same level of practice. These 13 Pure Yang adepts did not approve of anyone taking the risk to challenge a strong practitioner like Mara. Among the Mara adepts whose level of practice was comparable to the Dharma adepts, Mara of the same level was often stronger than human adepts because of his spiritual treasure. Those who could fight a Mara of the same level of practice were usually the best of the best among human adepts of the same level of practice. At this time, the battle outside the station was already in full swing. When Lu Ping looked over, he saw that the 3 mid-Dharma adepts, Xiahou Wushang, Chan Yu, and Chan Xiang, were barely able to fight a Jade Shura to a draw. This also showed that the 3 of them were strong among the same level of practice, and they were worthy of being adepts of their respective sections. Compared to the 3 of them, Green Fox was much weaker. She had tried to challenge a Jade Shura on her own, but the Jade Shura had the upper hand. She had no choice but to call for Green Tiger and Green Wolf's help, and only then did she have the upper hand in the battle against the Jade Shura. And Su Jin and Xie Tianyang's abilities were undoubtedly stronger than Xiahou Wushang and the other 2. Even if the 2 of them each dealt with the Jade Shura, they could still do it with ease. And Lu Ping could see that Xie Tianyang's abilities were even slightly stronger than Su Jin's. Sang Yu wholeheartedly wanted to compete with people of the same type, but he now had a grandaunt by his side. Wu Yinglan was only at the early Dharma stage, and her abilities were barely satisfactory. But it was not an easy task for her to take on a blood Shura alone. Sang Yu could only escort her along the way. However, in this way, he had seized the opportunity to kill a blood Shura and severely injure a blood demon. Compared to the others, he was the first to achieve results. When Lu Ping saw that his side wasn't in a disadvantageous position, he felt relieved. After all, there were still Tian Fan and Tian Shui, the 2 Laozu experts on the battlefield. When the 2 of them worked together, they were equivalent to the existence of a grand cultivator. As long as Mara's army didn't send out any Azuras, Mara's army wouldn't have any problems charging forward. Lu Ping simply ran to the array disk of the 5 elements formation to talk to the Black Fox. When the Black Fox saw Lu Ping, she was very surprised. "Why are you here? Aren't you going to fight?" Lu Ping chuckled and told her about the arranged battle, then asked, "How is it? How's the control of the 5 elements formation?" The Black Fox Immortal rolled her eyes at him and said, "The Wuxing School's formation detailed explanation is a formation passed down from Wuxing School for tens of thousands of years. It's extensive and profound. How can it be so easy to control? The 5 elements formation in the encampment this time is just borrowing the effect of the spiritual treasure, the 5 elements ring, to simplify the construction of many originally complicated and profound formations, without weakening the formation's power. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't take such a short time to set up such a formation." As the 2 of them spoke, they entered the location of the 5 elements formation. On the formation disk, which had a circumference of 30 feet, there were dozens of top-grade spirit stones embedded in it, and in the center of the formation disk was the 5 elements ring, which was shining with a 5-colored brilliance. Lu Ping looked at the formation disc, where the formation masters of his sect would replace the top-grade spirit stones that had exhausted their spiritual qi from time to time. He could not help but ask, the consumption of top-grade spirit stones is so fast. Do the sect have enough spirit stones? The Black Fox said, before setting up the formation, Martial Granduncle Tian Shui gave me 300 top-grade spirit stones. It took me 50 to set up the formation and maintain its operation. But now that the battle is going on, the consumption of spirit stones will increase. But 300 top-grade spirit stones are enough to last for a while. Lu Ping nodded and said, although there are a few places that are not used for gathering spirit, they are not spiritual veins. Otherwise, we can greatly reduce the consumption of spirit stones. The Black Fox also said, there is nothing we can do about it. Our sect's foundation is not as good as those famous sections. It is rare to be able to take out 300 top-grade spirit stones in one go. But who would have thought that Mara's counterattack would be so fast? And he is even coming for our sect. Lu Ping said, I have a few spiritual gathering pearls with me, but it is too late to use them to cultivate spiritual veins. Now the fastest way is to find 1 or 2 spiritual veins and bring them to the station. Or we can just separate a water vein from the Qingming River. Separate water vein? The Black Fox was a little surprised and said, this is a secret technique that only a few sacred lands and famous sects can master. How can we do it? Lu Ping lowered his head and muttered to himself. He took out a storage bag and said, there are 100 top-grade spirit stones in here. Just in case. The Black Fox was a little unhappy and said, this is a matter for the whole sect. How can you use your own things? Lu Ping smiled and said, this is not for the sect, but for you. You can use it as you see fit. At this time, the Black Fox realized the number of 100 top-grade spirit stones. Although she knew that her man was powerful, he could easily take out 100 top-grade spirit stones. She thought that even celestial phenomenon Laozu would not be able to do it so easily. She could not help but ask, where did you get so many top-grade spirit stones? Do you have enough for yourself? Why don't you just leave 50 and take the rest for yourself? Lu Ping wanted to show his wealth to the Black Fox, but he was afraid that he would scare her. So he just smiled and said, you can take it. I don't lack these. After saying that, Lu Ping stretched out his hand and threw the Linglong wine cauldron onto the 5-element ring in the center of the formation plate. Chapter 1276. Lu Ping had killed the water ape spirit of the treasure cauldron of heaven and earth in the branch of the Qingming River at the foot of Luo Xian Mountain. The Linglong wine cauldron had benefited a lot from it. Although Lu Ping had been suppressing her from summoning the second thunder tribulation, the Linglong wine cauldron had become more useful. Although the 5-element ring could maximize the circulation of the spiritual power stimulated by the spirit stone, the Linglong wine cauldron would undoubtedly increase the efficiency of the big formation. Moreover, the Linglong wine cauldron was a treasure that could be used to control the earth veins and gather spiritual qi. Using it to suppress the big formation, I could gather as much spiritual qi as possible for one's own use. However, Lu Ping was thinking about how to separate a water vein from the Qingming River for his own use. Zhenling's station was close to the Qingming River. If he could draw out a branch of the water vein, even if it was only a small one, it could save a lot of resources for Zhenling's practice. However, since ancient times, the secret technique of drawing water veins had only been in the hands of a few sanctums and famous sects, and it was an existence that was not passed down. Moreover, it was not a simple matter to use it. One only had to look at the effort that the 5-element sect had put into stealing the Nether River's veins to know. Lu Ping hesitated to ask Lin Yu Laozu for advice again. It was just that Lin Yu Laozu had given him the inheritance of the supreme magical power, the rare spiritual materials, and the secrets about the 7th Patriarch's Taoist altar. Lu Ping always felt that there was a scheme behind Lin Yu Laozu's generosity. Although Lu Ping did not think that Lin Yu Laozu's scheme could bring any harm to Zhenling, This kind of favors made Lu Ping somewhat flinch. Moreover, Ling Yulaozu himself might not know the secret method of drawing out the water vein. Actually, it's not too difficult to separate a branch from the Qingming River. Lu Ping was taken aback. Only then did he smack his head as he recalled that there was an existence in the core space that could be said to have been born in the hands of Taoist Chan, ever since he passed the third lightning tribulation at the foot of Luo Xian Mountain, and became a pure young spiritual treasure. Perhaps because he had to consume the gains from the advancement. The mantis had been hiding in the scissors and did not show itself. For a moment, Lu Ping had forgotten about the biggest trump card in his hand. The two halves of the spiritual treasure was not just a water-dissolving talisman. Back then, the Wuxia school had tried every means to find it, in order to make a cut in the water vein of the Qingming River, so that they could separate a water vein. It was precisely because they failed to find it in the end that the Wuxia school had to plan for hundreds of years and use other secret techniques to successfully draw out a water vein from the Qingming River. Now that the spiritual treasure had been cut in half, although it had fused the other half of the water transformation talisman together, its ability to separate the water veins would not disappear because of this. On the contrary, in the eyes of the mantis, cutting off a branch of the Qingming River was at least much easier than before. Lu Ping suppressed the joy in his heart and asked in a low voice, "Although you can separate a branch from the Qingming River, what do you need me to do? Will the separation process cause a lot of noise?" Although the two halves of the spiritual treasure could separate the water vein, it did not mean that Lu Ping could immediately put it into action. First of all, a pure young spiritual treasure was not that easy to control. Even if it could be controlled, it might not be able to fully exert the power of the pure young spiritual treasure. It also depended on who was in possession of the two halves. Back when it was only a second tribulation spiritual treasure, the pure young Laozu of Wuxia school was already able to use it to separate the water vein. Now that it was a pure young spiritual treasure, if it was in the hands of Lu Ping, it would not be able to fully exert its potential, and he would not be able to separate the water vein either. After the mantis had become a pure young spiritual treasure, its spiritual intelligence had obviously increased greatly. After a moment of silence, it said, "If it were an ordinary mid-dharma adept, it would naturally be impossible to control a pure young spiritual treasure. But back then, the water ape said that the technique you practiced was one of the 7 authentic techniques that Jiao Daoren had left behind. Coupled with the fact that your foundation is unbelievably strong, perhaps you can use 40 to 50% of the power of your original body. If that's the case, it should be enough. But doing so will obviously cause a lot of noise. At least the changes in the water vein of the Qingming River will not be able to hide from high-level adepts. It's up to you to find a way to confuse them." Lu Ping nodded and said, "If that's the case, no matter what, I have to give it a try. It's just that after separating the water vein and bringing it to the base, it will still be a troublesome matter. It won't be easy to do it without attracting attention." The mantis chuckled and said, "That will depend on how good the little beauty is." Ling Long, who had been placed on top of the 5 elements ring by Lu Ping, popped her head out of the wine cauldron and made a face at Lu Ping. She said, "Don't worry, big brother. After Ling Long absorbed the water ape's spiritual treasure, her own body has become more useful. It will not be difficult to bring the water vein here." And Ling Long can also suppress the water vein in the base for a period of time. After the sect gives up on this base, the water vein can return to the main water vein. That way, no one will suspect that we have stolen the water vein of the Qingming River. Lu Ping was overjoyed. He said, "That's good. We just need to find the right time, and we can try it secretly." The battle outside the base continued. If it was a one-on-one fight, Xiahou Wushang and the others had the upper hand in the fight against the Jade Shura. As for Su Jin and Sang Yu, if they were given enough time, they could kill a Jade Shura. However, in this chaotic battle, the evil Luo army had the advantage in numbers. Although Zhenling's sect had some experts, they only had a total of 40 to 50 disciples. It was already not easy for them to defend their base. Naturally, they couldn't provide any help to the heirs of the various sects who were in the midst of the evil Luo army. So although Xiahou Wushang, Su Jin, and the others were fighting against the Jade Shura, they were actually fighting against many people. They had to be careful of other Mara's interference. If someone like Mara intervened, they might be at a disadvantage. And there was also the Jade Demon. Shura and Xiaomo were in the same boat. If a Shura or a Xiaomo's power was equal, then when the two worked together, their power was not as simple as 1 + 1. Xiahou Wushang and the others were able to fight the Jade Shura without being at a disadvantage, even when they didn't have the upper hand. It was obvious that the people from the Holy Lands were not to be underestimated. Su Jin's cold ice silk sword was about to lock down the Jade Shura in front of him. The cold sword air made it difficult for the Jade Shura to move. Su Jin believed that he would only need a moment to injure the Jade Shura. But at this time, a bloodthirsty and violent presence invaded Su Jin's mind. Su Jin's face changed, and he quickly used his mind to block the soul-devouring god power. But the flying sword in his hand couldn't help but slow down. The Jade Shura, who had been trapped, suddenly found an opening and attacked. It broke Su Jin's sword formation. He saw that the points were flying away, and he had to start all over again. Su Jin looked in the direction of the soul-devouring god power, and he saw a jade demon hiding behind 2 Jade Shura. It was using its weird soul-devouring god power to harass everyone, and it was helping the other Jade Shura fight with the others. The 3 Jade Mara had come from the Mara army to join the fight after everyone started fighting. Luckily, Tian Fan and Tian Shui, the 2 Laozu from Jinling's side, quickly joined the fight. They managed to keep the 3 Jade Mara occupied, but they couldn't avoid the Jade Demon's support. Luckily, Su Jin had injured one of the Blood Shura at the beginning of the fight, and when he was fighting the Jade Shura, he took the chance to leave the fight and stabbed the Blood Shura. He got a point. Although it was only 30%, at least he didn't go back empty-handed. Sword cultivators were afraid of returning empty-handed after unsheathing their flying swords. Some extreme sword cultivators even had the principle of seeing blood when their flying swords were unsheathed. Although Su Jin didn't stop there, he didn't want to stand there without gaining anything. Compared to him, the Jade Shura that Xie Tianyang was facing was much worse. From the beginning of the fight, Xie Tianyang had targeted the Jade Shura. Even with the Jade Demon's support, Xie Tianyang clearly had a way to resist the Jade Demon's soul-devouring god power. At this time, the Jade Shura's companion spirit treasure was almost destroyed by Xie Tianyang, and there were a few sword wounds all over its body. Su Jin sighed. This 6th junior brother's cultivation was getting higher and higher. Although he was the 3rd heir of the Purple Sun Palace, in terms of power, Xie Tianyang was already above him. Sang Yu had originally planned to give up on this opportunity to compete for battle merits because of Wu Yinglan. With his help, Wu Yinglan had even successfully killed a blood demon. This was a kill against someone of the same level, so it was full of battle merits. However, the excited Wu Yinglan was immediately ambushed by a blood demon because she had left Sang Yu's rescue range. Then she was injured by a blood Shura. In a rage, Sang Yu escorted Wu Yinglan back to the base, then turned back and killed his way into Mara's army. He forcefully took a blow from a Jade Shura and killed the Blood Shura that had injured Wu Yinglan. However, he was immediately engaged by the Jade Shura from before, so he knew that he couldn't get many points now. Xiahou Wushang's situation wasn't good either. Under the entanglement of a Jade Shura and 2 Blood Mara, he was at a disadvantage. However, with Yin Jian supporting him from the side, he wasn't completely suppressed. It was a pity that Yin Jian's cultivation was limited, so he couldn't give Xiahou Wushang too much support. On the other hand, Chan Yu and Chan Xiang seemed to be in a much better situation. These two had mid-Dharma level cultivation, and in terms of power, they might be slightly weaker than Xiahou Wushang. However, the two of them didn't fight alone. When they fought together, they had the upper hand. Chapter 1277. Since Su Jin, Xie Tianyang. and the other 2 Jade Shura had managed to fend off the 4 Jade Shura. The 2 sisters decided to join forces to fight against the only Jade Mara among the 5. Without the protection of the 4 Jade Shura, the other 3 Jade Mara that had rushed over were blocked by Tian Shui and Tian Fan, the 2 Laozu, so the Jade Demon simply gathered 3 Blood Shura to assist it from the side. With that, it was able to fend off the joint attack of the 2 sisters. However, Lu Tianyuan had already rushed over. Originally, Lu Tianyuan had only wanted to help the 2 sisters snatch battle merits. Seeing that they were entangled, he immediately launched a sneak attack on one of the Blood Shura. After Lu Tianyuan had fused with the Dharma soul left behind by Tian Kong Laozu, his cultivation had improved greatly. Among cultivators of the same level, his strength might not necessarily lose to cultivators of the same level from the large sections. Now that he had launched a sneak attack on the Blood Shura, he was able to heavily injure the Blood Shura in one fell swoop. After a series of fierce attacks, a battle merit of the same level was about to fall into his hands. Chan Yu, Chan Xiang, and Lu Tianyuan's group of 3 appeared to have a much easier time. However, the ones who were truly the best at snatching battle merits were Qing Hu and the other 2. This time, when Mara's army attacked, the first 5 Jade Mara were snatched by the proud and arrogant cultivators of the large sections. Qing Hu and the other 2 were unable to compete with them. As for the 3 Jade Mara that had rushed over later, they were blocked by the 2 Laozu, Tian Fan and Tian Shui. Qing Hu and the other 2 were still unable to interfere. Feeling helpless, the 3 of them could only join forces to deal with the Bloody Mara. This time, the 3 of them managed to obtain quite a number of battle achievement points. Green Fox was a mid-Dharma adept, and her abilities were not weak to begin with. With Lu Ping's help, she had obtained the Thieving Divine Axe from the Thieving Heavens treasure trove, and her abilities had increased tremendously. Although she was no match for Xiahou Wushang, Chan Yu, Chan Xiang, and the other heirs of the major sects, she had a one-sided advantage against Blood Mara. In addition, she had Green Wolf and Green Tiger, who were both strong early Dharma adepts by her side. After a series of battles, 3 Blood Azuras had fallen at the hands of the 3 of them. Furthermore, Green Wolf and Green Tiger had intentionally allowed the points of these 3 Blood Azuras to fall to Green Fox. In reality, if the points had fallen to Green Wolf and Green Tiger, because they were early Dharma adepts, their points would have been higher. However, it was clear that the 2 of them were not optimistic about their chances of obtaining battle achievement points. Instead, they were willing to work for Green Fox. The battle around the Jinling station was still in full swing. Under the leadership of Ji Tianxian and Li Tianru, close to 50 Jinling core forging adepts operated the Dao Soldier formation and relied on the protection of the station to firmly block the attacks of Mara's army. Although Mara's army had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers, because of the various Dharma adepts outside, Mara's army did not receive any help from the high-level Mara when they surrounded and attacked the formation. However, even so, Mara's army still caused some casualties to the Jinling disciples. Although Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian had already done their best to save them, the operation of the Dao Soldier formation required the cooperation of tens of people. It was inevitable that there would be gaps, and Mara's army would be able to take advantage of them. At this point in the battle, 4 of the Jinling core forging disciples had already fallen, and more than 10 people had suffered injuries of varying severity. Among them, 5 people had no choice but to temporarily leave the operation of the Dao Soldier formation because their injuries were more serious. However, this time, the attack of close to 1,000 Mara of various sizes had already been killed by the Dao Soldier formation. Before Mara's flames of arrogance could even rise, it was once again extinguished. As the battle progressed, the morale of the Jinling soldiers became higher and higher. On the other hand, the morale of Mara's army had been worn down by the continuous casualties. This time, Mara's army's attack did not make any progress, causing the Azura behind to be extremely furious. A fierce roar could be heard, and one of the 3 Azura finally couldn't hold back and wanted to attack. In the encampment, Lu Ping's expression changed. and he hurriedly rushed out from the encampment's array disc. However, he saw that Han Wuya and Tianshan Laozu had already stepped out of the encampment's array. Tianshan Laozu was holding on to the second tribulation spiritual treasure, mountain-splitting axe, while Han Wuya was holding onto 2 jade whips. He had also taken Ho Wuin's jade whip. These 2 first tribulation spiritual treasures were like Tian Shui and Tianfan Laozu's wind and snow dual fans. They were originally a set. Now that the wind and snow dual whips were in Han Wuya's hands, their strength didn't decrease, but increased instead. Lu Ping looked at Lin Yu and Laozu. However, he saw Lin Yu and Laozu making a gesture to calm down. Lu Ping knew that the current situation hadn't reached the worst, so he didn't participate in the battle. Unexpectedly, the Azura let out a fierce roar, causing Jinling's army to panic. However, it was a signal to retreat. The Azura's sudden appearance was originally to restrain Jinling's army, allowing Mara's army, which was tangling with Jinling's army, to retreat smoothly. Jade Mara and Blood Mara, who were entangled with the others, took the opportunity to retreat. Very quickly, they gathered together and retreated. The numerous cultivators on Jinling's side wanted to rush forward and leave 1 or 2 Azura behind as battle merits. However, facing the gathered Mara's army, as well as the Azura that came to support them, they were all worried and didn't dare to chase after them. For a moment, Chan Yu Chan Xiang, Xiahou Wushang, Su Jin and Sang Yu, who were fighting Jade Mara, retreated. Chan Yu was so angry that she directly killed a blood Azura that was being suppressed by Lu Tianyuan, forcibly snatching 3 points from Lu Tianyuan's hands, causing Lu Tianyuan to smile bitterly. Tian Fan and Tian Shui, the 2 Laozu, who were able to block 3 Jade Mara's attacks, had already done their best. Now that Mara had retreated, the 2 of them let out a sigh of relief. Xiahou Wushang, Su Jin, and Sang Yu saw that there was no hope of stopping the Jade Shura. They originally wanted to turn around and kill a few blood Shura, but they didn't succeed. Only Qing Hu and the other 2 were stronger than the blood Mara. So when Mara's army retreated, they took the opportunity to kill a blood Shura. The 3 of them rushed forward, and naturally, the blood Shura was no match for them. In the end, it was killed by Qing Hu's axe. Her imaging stone showed that her battle merits had reached 14 points. Among them, only Xie Tianyang was chasing the Jade Shura that he was fighting, but in reality, he was also chasing the Jade Shura towards Mara's army. Everyone turned pale with fright. Just as they were about to step forward to stop him, it was already too late. They heard the Azura in the distance roar. It stretched out its hand and grabbed. A giant hand of spiritual energy slapped toward Xie Tianyang's head. Seeing that Xie Tianyang was about to be hit by the spiritual qi hand, the space around him began to shake because of the descent of the spiritual qi hand. It was obvious that the Azura's attack wanted to kill Xie Tianyang. The shaking space had cut off Xie Tianyang's path of retreat. At this critical moment, 2 crisp sounds came from the void. Han Wuya, who was hundreds of feet away, suddenly made his move. 2 whip shadows crisscrossed through the air, cutting off half of the giant hand made of spiritual energy in one fell swoop. However, the remaining half of the palm still enveloped Xie Tianyang. Seeing that Xie Tianyang was about to die, the usually calm and collected ancestor of Tianshan suddenly let out a roar. The mountain-splitting axe flew out of his hand and instantly arrived above Xie Tianyang's head. It drew a semicircular arc and completely shattered the remaining half of the giant spiritual energy palm, allowing Xie Tianyang to escape from danger. At this time, there was a scream. The Jade Shura, who had been chased by Xie Tianyang, was hit by the flaming sky sun sword. Her whole body was on fire, and there was a scream coming from the fire. Xie Tianyang let out a long sigh of relief. His back was soaked in cold sweat, and he didn't dare to stay any longer. He turned around and flew back to Jinling's camp. Su Jin came to help him. When the 2 of them saw each other, they were scolded by Su Jin. Xie Tianyang just laughed and didn't say anything. He just thanked Laozu of Sky Mountain for helping him. In fact, when Mara's army was retreating, it was the best time to kill the Jade Shura that Xie Tianyang was suppressing. Because all of the Mara were retreating, and the blood Mara that had been harassing Xie Tianyang had retreated. The Jade Shura was now alone and helpless. Xie Tianyang was eager to make a contribution, so he naturally did not want to give up this fleeting opportunity. For a moment, he forgot that there was an Azura coming to rescue him not far away. If Han Wuya and the Celestial Mountain Patriarch tried their best to save him, Xie Tianyang would probably have to pay with his life. That Azura stopped attacking after missing his first strike. Instead, he retreated with the Mara army, and everyone else returned to Zhenling Sect's encampment. Xie Tianyang saw that no one else had managed to kill the Jade Mara other than him, and the fear he felt earlier was long forgotten. He immediately became arrogant. Show them all. Let's see how many points you have. Xie Tianyang shouted. He wanted all the mid-Dharma adepts who had agreed to fight this time to show their kill records. He had killed a Jade Shura, which was 10 points. Xiahou Wushang and Chan Xiang had nothing. Chan Yu had 3 points, but it was the blood Shura that she had taken from Lu Tianyuan. Su Jin had also killed a blood Shura, so he also had 3 points. Sang Yu had killed a blood demon, so she had 5 points. Xie Tianyang saw that everyone was a level lower than him, and his whole aura changed. He was like a true adept from a holy land, which made Su Jin laugh bitterly. Brother Lu, didn't you also have a battle with the evil Luo army before? Show us your points and let us have a look. Although Lu Tianyuan and the others were not qualified to participate because they were early Dharma adepts, this did not stop them from seeing the results of the fights. However, when they saw Xie Tianyang challenge Lu Ping, Lu Tianyuan, Qin Yu, and Qin Gang all had strange expressions on their faces. However, Xie Tianyang was too excited to notice their expressions. Seeing Xie Tianyang's provocation, Lu Ping smiled and said, "There's no hurry. There's still one more person you haven't fought." "Who?" Xie Tianyang chuckled and said, "Who else?" Lu Ping pointed at Green Fox and said, "Her." "How many?" Cyan Fox chuckled softly as she handed her photographic stone to Xie Tianyang. The number of points she had accumulated was clearly displayed on it. 14. Chapter 1278. Xie Tianyang immediately yelled at the sight of the 14 accolades on the Azure Fox imaging stone. "That's impossible." Lu Ping smiled and said, "Why not? Just take a look at the recording on the stone, and you'll know." Xie Tianyang still did not believe it. He took Green Fox's imaging stone and said, "I noticed that I was the only one who killed the Jade Shura in this battle. None of you did. How could you surpass me?" Lu Ping and Green Fox smiled but did not say anything. Green Wolf and Green Tiger looked at each other, waiting to see Xie Tianyang make a fool of himself. The 3 blood Shuras had a total of 9 points, and the blood demon had 5 points. That was a total of 14 points. Xie Tianyang even carefully looked at the recording of how Green Fox had killed the 4 Mara Shuras. "Cheating. You guys are cheating. It's one thing for a mid-Dharma adept to kill the blood demon Luo, who was 1 level lower than you, but you even teamed up with 2 early Dharma adepts and gave the last hit to you. No wonder your score is higher than mine. I can't accept this." Xie Tianyang pounded his chest and stamped his feet, but the others all burst into laughter. Green Fox giggled as she snatched the imaging stone back from Xie Tianyang's hands. "Who can we blame for this? You all were too quick to act. You divided up a few Jade Demons right away, and we'll be looking for another Jade Demon to fight against. Are you all willing to give it up?" Xie Tianyang was exasperated, but when he saw Lu Ping's carefree smile, it was as if he had found a straw to clutch at. He hurriedly said, "Brother Lu, we've seen Sister Qing Hu's battle achievements. It's time for you to show us your points. We were outnumbered. That's why we couldn't get more points. How many points did you get when you fought against the Demon Luo army? Even Sister Qing Hu has more points than you. Don't tell me you can't even beat me, old Xie, hee." Lu Ping laughed as he looked at Xie Tianyang. "Brother Xie, are you sure you want to compete?" Xie Tianyang was not confident. It was not just Xie Tianyang. The other Holy Land's heirs were the same. Although all of them were prideful and wanted to compete with Lu Ping, they would not have agreed to the accumulated points challenge earlier. However, Each of them knew very well that this North Sea water sword immortal was someone who had even defeated several great cultivators. No matter how indignant they really did not have the confidence to completely defeat a great cultivator. This gap was not something that could be bridged just by being indignant. Although Xie Tianyang wasn't confident, it was still a joke between good friends. He continued to shout, "Stop talking nonsense and show us. What's wrong? You don't dare? Are you trying to trick us?" Xie Tianyang was even trying to goad Xie Tianyang. Although the others did not say anything, they looked very eager. Clearly, they also wanted to know Lu Ping's accumulated points. Lu Ping also chuckled and gave Xie Tianyang a look that said, "Don't regret this." Then he took out his own imaging stone. Everyone swarmed over, and they saw a despairing number on Lu Ping's imaging stone. 50. Xie Tianyang immediately cried out, "No way!" Sang Yu, who was beside him, was also shocked. "That's too fake. You were going to stop Mara's army, but you were outnumbered. Did you mean that Mara's army just stood there and let you kill them?" Not only the two of them, but the others were also looking at Lu Ping strangely. 1 Jade Shura, 1 Jade Demon, 5 Blood Shuras and 2 Blood Demons. Such a result made everyone look at each other in bewilderment. On the side, Xie Tianyang opened the imaging stone to record the entire process. He only saw Lu Ping waving his hand, and a large number of demonic luos were turned into dried corpses that fell from the sky. For a moment, everyone was shocked. Xie Tianyang even muttered, "So cruel, so cruel." Even Qin Yu and Qin Gang, who had personally witnessed Lu Ping's art of changing seas and mulberry fields, felt a chill run down their spines when they saw Lu Ping's peerless divine ability again. But everyone saw something else from the imaging stone. Lu Ping had always been a swordsman in the world of practice. Even now, Lu Ping was like the sun in the sky on the Central Plains. People called him the North Sea Water Sword Immortal. But in the process of killing so many Maras, the imaging stone didn't show Lu Ping's swordsmanship. It was obviously some other kind of power. But wasn't Lu Tianping a swordsman? Had Lu Tianping been hiding his true power all this time? This person's attainment in swordsmanship was already so high. Just what level had his true power reached? Was the strange power shown by the imaging stone a display of his true power? Everyone looked at Lu Ping with complicated gazes. They had not been able to achieve the desired result when they were outnumbered. They had felt a little regretful at first, but when they saw the shocking scene shown by Lu Ping's imaging stone, they realized that Lu Ping had been in a much more serious situation than they had expected. Xie Tianyang and the others were all proud and arrogant people. After seeing everything that flashed in the imaging stone, they had no choice but to admit that Lu Ping's true strength was probably much higher than they had estimated. The gap between them and Lu Ping was also clearly much larger than they had imagined. Mara's army had just dispersed, but no one knew if they would attack again in the next moment. Although everyone had made a ruckus because of the arranged battle, they still knew what was important. After they split up, they began to use the spiritual qi that the Jinling camp could barely gather to recover the vital qi in their bodies, so that they could deal with the battle that could happen at any time. Although Lu Ping had not participated in the battle just now, he did not want to disturb everyone, so he left. Unexpectedly, Xie Tianyang stopped him. "I have to thank Senior Lin Yu. Han Wuya must have intervened because of him. If it wasn't for him, I might have lost my life at the hands of that Azura." Lu Ping shrugged and said, "Can you find him now?" After the Azura appeared, Lin Yu Laozu suddenly disappeared from Jinling's camp. However, Lu Ping's divine telekinesis was powerful enough to confirm that Lin Yu Laozu was still in Jinling's camp. He had just concealed his figure and aura, so that no one could detect him. "That's why I'm asking you. You've been in the camp all this time, so you must know where he went." Xie Tianyang said matter-of-factly. Lu Ping spread his hands helplessly and said, "I don't know either." Of course, Lu Ping knew where Lin Yu Laozu was, but Lin Yu Laozu had hidden himself for a reason. Even if Lu Ping knew where Lin Yu Laozu was, he would not expose him. Xie Tianyang was a little puzzled and said, "Why did Senior Lin Yu hide? Did he want to trick the Azura?" But with his strength, he did not have to do that, did he? Naturally, Lu Ping wouldn't tell them about Lin Yu's injuries. Instead, he looked around and said, Brother Xia, do you know why the Azura army didn't launch a full-scale attack on our sect's encampment? Instead, they only sent out 8 Jade Demon Azuras. If the 3 Azuras and the remaining Jade Demon Azuras attacked together, we wouldn't be able to defend our encampment. Xia Tianyang also cast a glance at the void surrounding the encampment. Pursing his lips, he sneered. What's so strange about that? The Moro army has caused such a huge commotion, and there are more than one sect around the encampment. I'm afraid that all the sects that participated in the battle against the Moro army have already received the news. I'm afraid that there are already many people lurking in the nearby void. They're just watching from the sidelines, or waiting to take advantage of the situation. However, Azura has obviously discovered these enemies hiding in the void. They're worried that they'll be attacked from the back if they go all out. So they naturally don't dare to put all their strength into attacking the encampment. Xia Tianyang suddenly realized something and said, Are you saying that Senior Lin Yu wants to lure the cultivators hiding in the empty space to attack? Lu Ping smiled bitterly and said, If we don't think of a way to stop these people from attacking, once the 3 Azuras can't hold back an attack, do you think our camp will be able to withstand them? Xia Tianyang was confused and said, Then can't he just reveal his identity? With his strength, he can at least hold back 2 Azuras. It might not be impossible for him to stop all 3 of them. Coupled with pure Yang Laozu's rallying power, once the surrounding cultivators attack, the chances of winning are quite high. Lu Ping naturally could not tell him that Lin Yu Laozu was heavily injured. He only sighed and said, Brother Xia, Zhenling is not your Purple Sun Palace. Lin Yu Laozu is also not comparable to pure Yang Laozu of Purple Sun Palace. These people are people who won't act until they see the rabbit. If we want them to attack, even if we have a 100% chance of winning, there will only be a sliver of a chance if we can guarantee their own safety. Lu Ping smiled bitterly and said, After all, Emo Luo's counterattack this time is aimed at our sect's encampment. Even if Emo Luo manages to open up a path to break out of the encirclement, the sect will still be responsible for it. In a situation where it has nothing to do with them, they would rather watch our sect fight to the last man than help us. It was not that Xia Tianyang did not understand this, but because of his background, he did not need to consider these things at all. After all, no one in the cultivation world could force Purple Sun Palace into such a predicament. Then how is Senior Lin Yu going to lure these people who are watching from the sidelines to attack? Let's wait and see. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.